Chapter 750. At the entrance of the base, there were no detectors or devices that could detect the presence of the virus. Just like that, they passed by emptily. Wang Jian and the others parked their cars in front of the entrance in a daze. But they didn't dare to follow the car in front of them. "Hey, are you guys still going in?" The staff at the entrance saw Wang Jian, and the others stopped there, and couldn't help but urge them. Wang Jian directly opened the car door and jumped out, followed by Huang Tiange. "Wait, are we really going in just like that? Didn't you guys use the detectors?" Wang Jian walked to the entrance and looked left and right as he asked the staff. The staff member glanced at him, then pointed to the top of the wall above. He said, "Oh, our detectors are up there, and this is the second test. Didn't you guys go through the first one just now?" Wang Jian looked up at the top of the wall, but he didn't see anything. He looked down at the staff in a daze. "Ah, just now. When?" He didn't know that if they had the virus in their bodies, then zombie number 5 wouldn't have let them pass the defense line. There was also a zombie guarding the entrance. As long as they were infected with Lin Xiao's virus, they would be very sensitive to normal zombie viruses. Just like how Lin Xiao could sense the energy of the virus, they had become mobile detectors. If you guys were infected, then those zombies wouldn't have let you guys pass. Even if they wanted to, they wouldn't have let you guys pass. The staff at the entrance looked up at them and said indifferently. Wang Jian and Huang Tiange looked at each other in confusion, and then they were chased inside by the staff like ducks. "Hurry up and go in. The vice leader is still waiting for you guys." "Oh right, how did the vice leader know we were coming?" Wang Jian suddenly thought of a question. Of course they knew. Our leader's information network is very fast. Right now, we can receive news from all the major bases in the country. What do you guys count for? You guys made such a big commotion. How could we not know? The staff said with a slightly proud expression. "So that's how it is. Since that's the case, let's go in." Wang Jian nodded his head and got into the car. He gestured to the driver to go in. Initially, he was afraid that some of the people he brought with him might have been infected with the virus during the test at the entrance. Who would have thought that they would say that there was no need for a test here? However, Wang Jian was still a little worried in his heart. He was afraid that he might accidentally infect others with the virus. He thought that he should bring those who seemed to be unwell to the medical department for a thorough examination. At this moment, a figure suddenly descended from the sky. Wait a moment. A young girl with short hair appeared in front of Wang Jian and the others. The girl was dressed in clean black sportswear. It was February, and the weather was still very cold, but the girl only wore a single piece of sportswear. She didn't wear a thick coat either. The short-haired girl wore a pair of sunglasses, revealing half of her pale face and pale lips. As soon as the staff at the door saw her, they immediately ran out and stood beside her. At the same time, they pressed the door switch and closed the door first. Then they carefully asked, "Excuse me, is there a problem with these people?" Elmar turned her gaze to the car in the middle and pointed at it. "There's someone in that car who is awakening his ability. Get him out of there first." Wang Jian and the others looked back blankly. The people in the car were all sick. He wouldn't have been surprised if they were infected with the virus. But this girl said that there was someone in there who had awakened his ability. That was a pleasant surprise. "Really?" Wang Jian looked at the car blankly before turning back. His face was full of joy as he asked Elmar for confirmation. He didn't care about what was going on with this strange girl. After all, after seeing the horde of zombies earlier, he was no longer as vigilant towards the zombies in this area. Elmar nodded her head. "My intuition can't be wrong. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get him out. His awakening doesn't look too good. If we're late, something bad might happen." Wang Jian immediately dragged Huang Tiange out and pushed him back. Go, go, go. Hurry up and see what's going on over there." Huang Tiange immediately ran to the car in the middle. A group of people immediately searched the car in a hurry. He's been unconscious ever since he took the medicine that day. I don't know when his body temperature became so high. The person in charge of taking care of the car pointed at an unconscious man with his eyes closed. It was the man whom Wang Jian and the others had tried to save on the day when Li Honglin and the others had stolen their things. At that time, They were afraid that he wouldn't be able to make it. Who would have thought that he would still be alive after taking the medicine? Now he had awakened his ability. That's him. Carry him out. Elmar came over. She then continued. His condition isn't good. His body's functions are almost non-existent. Hurry up and send him to Linhao. Get him to help. Elmar turned to the staff at the door and waved her hand. She wanted him to come over and take care of the awakened man. Yes, understood. The staff immediately came over and found 2 people to help carry the awakened man out of the car. Wang Jian took a few steps back to put some distance between him and Elmar. He looked at her curiously and asked, Can you sense when someone awakens their ability? Elmar turned to look at him. Yes, what's wrong? Oh, it's nothing. But thank you. Wang Jian waved his hand. He looked up at the sky curiously. There wasn't any sun. Why did he need to wear sunglasses? Let's go in. Elmar waved at Wang Jian. She could tell that Wang Jian was the leader of the group. Oh, okay. We'll go in now. Wang Jian nodded. He turned around and called for everyone to drive into the base. Elmar raised her hand and pushed the sunglasses on her face. She turned around and jumped up to the top of the wall. At this time, in front of the group of zombies, female zombie number 5 was looking at Li Honglin and the others with a ferocious expression. She bared her fangs and roared at them. The group of zombies behind her had all come out. They were blocking the middle of the road, not letting anyone pass. What's wrong with these zombies? Why can they let Wang Jian and the others pass, but not us? Chen Hao stared at the female zombie with a vigilant face. He was afraid that she would suddenly pounce on them. The people on the other side didn't dare to move because this was a level 5 female zombie. They were only level 3. The female zombie stood in the middle of the road. She didn't move, she just grinned and roared at them. Chapter 751. Just now I thought it was strange. Why are these zombies blocking here? Since we bypassed the previous zombie hordes, there was no trace of zombies on the way here. Or could it be that this new base is a fake? If Wang Jian and the others went in, they might not be able to come out. Lu Tong looked at the female zombie with a thoughtful expression on his face. His expression was calm as he thought about the situation before him. What do you mean? Li Honglin turned to look at him and asked. That's impossible. If it's fake, then who released the news? Why would anyone release news about a fake base? Chen Hao's eyes flashed as he continued. Besides, how can you be sure that it's fake? That's right. It's normal for there to be zombies guarding the perimeter of the base. Besides, we haven't even reached the walls yet. Li Honglin agreed with Chen Hao and turned to look at Lu Tong. Lu Tong looked at the zombie hordes in front of him with uncertainty in his heart. Why don't we wait and see if we can meet other humans and ask them about the situation before we go in? Or we can go in another direction. Why did these zombies let Wang Jian and the others pass, but not us? Chen Hao looked at the zombie hordes in confusion. These zombies were different from the ones they had encountered before. Before, the zombies would only need to smell them from afar to attack them in a frenzy. However, the zombies in front of him were strangely standing there quietly, not moving, not going crazy, and not pouncing on him. Only the level 5 female zombie had a fierce expression on her face. Her attitude towards Wang Jian and the others was obviously quite good. Even if she threw them one by one, she would just grab their clothes or kick them away. It was obvious that she avoided using her nails to touch them. Most importantly, her expression was very calm before. Unlike now, when she had a ferocious expression on her face, as if she would roar at them as soon as they got close. Because someone in your group has been infected by the virus. Didn't you guys realize it? At this time, a clear and elegant voice came from above. Li Honglin and the others raised their heads slightly and saw a young girl in black sportswear standing on a high-voltage electric pole next to the female zombie. The girl had short hair, but she was not afraid of the cold. She wore thin clothes and stood on a high vantage point, letting the cold wind blow on her. A pair of dark sunglasses covered the area above his nose. Infected with a virus? Impossible. We are not infected by the virus. Li Honglin was slightly taken aback by the sudden appearance of the girl. Then he realized what the girl had said. He immediately retorted. If there was a virus infection, he would have killed the other party long ago, or pushed him out to fend for himself. There was no way he could stay in his own team. It turned out that Wang Jian's group was able to pass through, because they were not infected by the virus. And they couldn't get through here. Was it because they were infected? Looks like you've been tricked. Elmar flashed and appeared next to female zombie number 5. She said to Li Honglin and the others, "She won't let you in because there are virus carriers in your group. Unless we can separate this person, none of you will be able to enter." Li Honglin, Chun Hao, and Lu Tong turned around instinctively. Lu Tong only swept a glance behind him before turning back to Elmar and asking, "Why should we believe you?" Elmar shrugged and said indifferently, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. It doesn't matter if you don't join our base. There are other bases you can join." Among the group of people on Li Honglin's side, there was one person who kept his head down. His head was covered by a hat that was attached to his clothes, covering his head and face. His hands were tightly hidden in his sleeves. Everyone's attention was attracted by Elmar and the zombies, so they didn't notice the state of this person. Chun Hao first swept his gaze over everyone on his side. After making sure that there was nothing out of the ordinary about them, he said, after confirming that there was nothing wrong with them, he moved his gaze to Li Honglin's group. "Who is not feeling well, come out yourself." Chun Hao shouted, "If you want to go in, then go in one by one. We will find that person. There is no need to waste so much time." At this time, Elmar suddenly said, "Okay, then my people will go first." Chun Hao immediately agreed and waved his hand. It wasn't that he immediately believed Elmar, this little girl who looked like she hadn't even grown her hair yet. He just felt that since they had already come this far, there shouldn't be any mistakes. Also, he didn't think that this new base would use zombies as a detector. This was something new. As long as these zombies didn't attack, he had nothing to be afraid of. After saying that, he looked back at Li Honglin and Lu Tong, then waved his hand to signal his people to go first. "Brothers, they won't go. Let's go first. When we get to the new base, we will find a job and have a place to live." He then looked at Lu Tong with a hidden meaning and laughed coldly in his heart. If he doesn't go in, then it's even better. Now I have to think of a way to stop him from going in. Chun Hao had other thoughts in his mind, but he still had to fake a smile and ask Lu Tong, "Lu Tong, I think this is the place. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing we can do. Why don't you wait outside? I will go in and find out the situation, then come out and tell you. What do you think?" Hearing this, Lu Tong's eyes lit up. He turned to look at Li Honglin and said, "That's a good idea. I think we can wait outside. Let Chun Hao go in and find out the situation. Then they can make a decision after seeing the reaction of Chun Hao and his people." Also, he had something on Chun Hao, so he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't come out. "I don't mind." Li Honglin nodded and looked up at him. Lu Tong turned to look at Chun Hao, with a pale smile on his handsome face. "Then don't forget what you said." After saying that, his eyes dimmed a little, then returned to normal with a faint smile. Female zombie number 5 looked at these people. She didn't know these people's names, so she glanced at Li Honglin's face. She shook her head in her heart, rough looks, no temperament, and not tall enough. After giving him a score of 50, she immediately looked at Lu Tong. This body was too skinny, like a pork chop, and his face looked sick and unhealthy. Although his face was not bad, it wasn't good to look at this kind of face that could be blown away by the wind. For the sake of his face, she gave him a pass. Looking at Lu Hao, he was even uglier. His appearance was a bit fierce, his head was also quite big, and his body was burly. He was basically a muscle man. It was fine to be a muscle man, as long as he was handsome. The problem was that this man looked too fierce. Although he wasn't ugly, he just didn't look good. Judging from his aura, he was a bit better than the previous two. It was just that he didn't look as good as the weak chicken. 58 points. Female zombie number 5 couldn't pass the test of Chun Hao's looks, she failed. Chapter 752. Lu Tong felt female zombie 5's gaze on him. He didn't know why, but he felt like this female zombie was picking vegetables. If it suited his appetite, he would eat it, and if it didn't, he would throw it away. Thinking of this, Lu Tong's heart turned cold. When the female zombie's gaze swept over him, he quietly moved his body behind the others. Li Honglin and Lu Hao noticed this, but they didn't care. Elmar nodded to female zombie 5 and said, "Then we'll go one by one." The female zombie immediately turned around and roared at the group of zombies behind her. Roar! Following that, the group of zombies separated to form a 2-meter-wide path. Chun Hao pushed someone out from the side. "You go first." The person who was pushed out was an ordinary-looking man. He didn't look too old. He looked around 20 years old. After being pushed out, he looked back at Chun Hao with a blank face, as if he didn't expect to be pushed out. "What? Go over. Do you want to enter the new base?" Chun Hao said to him. The man immediately understood that he was thrown out to be a guinea pig. Although he was very unwilling, he had no choice but to submit to Chun Hao's pressure. He carefully walked over, and when he got close to the female zombie, his whole body stiffened. Roar! Female zombie 5 impatiently roared at him, then waved her hand at him. She signaled him to go in quickly. On this side, the people from Hades King's base encountered a small interlude. On the other side, the prey that Lin Xiao was waiting for had appeared. The originally calm lake began to surge, and then a huge shadow appeared in the water. Lin Xiao and the others looked down from the surrounding trees and saw that the shadow was more than 10 meters long. The thick body in the middle was very huge. Looking at the huge shadow that gradually appeared in the water, for words appeared in everyone's heart. Prehistoric crocodile. He watched as a large piece of rough but hard skin emerged from the lake. The skin was covered with large pieces of rough scales. There was a row of sharp horns on the back. Following that, a huge crocodile body appeared, and a pair of cold and narrow eyes also appeared from the water. The killing intent in the eyes immediately spread out in all directions. 4 sturdy legs and huge claws pushed its huge body out of the water. Then it walked towards the shore step by step. Bang! Bang! With each step the ground shook. It had a ferocious crocodile's mouth and thick, long and sharp teeth. Dragging a thick and powerful tail behind it, it slowly came ashore. Lin Xiao and the others looked at the huge snapping turtle from afar. Its body was already as big as a truck, and its thick tail was at least 15 meters long. Its body length had already reached more than 30 meters. The giant crocodile crawled up to the shore step by step. It took it a full 30 to 40 seconds before it was completely out of the water. The giant crocodile, which had completely come ashore, spread out with a fierce and vicious aura. On the other side, Chiu Lily turned to look at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao shook his head at her and raised his hand to make a gesture. He wanted to wait for the giant crocodile to reach the shore and move further away from the lake before he made his move. The giant crocodile seemed to be very slow in sensing the aura around it, or rather, it did not care. It walked up. Although it was huge, it didn't make much noise. Its footsteps were steady, but the ground would still tremble. Lin Xiao and the others quietly followed behind it. They didn't get too close, because even if they didn't get too close, they could still feel the wild aura of this guy. The giant crocodile walked forward with familiarity. Not long after, it arrived at an empty hill. It climbed to the top of the hill and lay down. Then it began to bask in the sun. A large part of the top of the hill had been flattened. It seemed that it was often pressed down by something heavy. Now that the giant crocodile lay down, it began to close its eyes and bask in the sun. It seemed that it often came here to lie down. Lin Xiao's figure flashed and appeared at the bottom of the hill. She slightly raised her head and looked at the giant crocodile that was only a dozen meters high. The aura emitted from the giant crocodile, that looked like a prehistoric monster, had reached the peak of level 6. Although it had not entered the level 7 stage, it was still much stronger than ordinary level 6. As expected of a ferocious beast, its lethality and defense were very strong. Lin Xiao stealthily walked toward the giant crocodile. She squatted on the grass and began to slowly release black gas. The black gas began to disperse along the cover of the grass and slid toward the top of the hill. Not long after, it moved around the giant crocodile's head and swayed around the crocodile's nose and eyes. Suddenly, in a flash, it completely disappeared into the crocodile's nose. Puff! The giant crocodile's head shook and a fierce breath came out of its nose as if it was sneezing. However, it did not spit out the black gas. At this moment, suddenly, the sound of wind blowing came from the top of the surrounding forest. The giant crocodile's eyes suddenly opened, and its sharp eyeballs turned. Then, a violent hurricane suddenly blew from all directions in the sky. The hurricane carried countless wind blades that slashed toward the giant crocodile. Puff, 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 whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The hurricane blew the surrounding vegetation down and bent the branches. When the wind blades cut through, the grass and leaves turned into debris and flew everywhere. Sand and stones flew everywhere. However, when these wind blades cut through the vegetation and cut the giant crocodile's body, they did not hurt it. Not even the scales were shaved off. Roar! The giant crocodile was shaken by the wind. Its huge tail swept back and forth, sweeping hundreds of kilograms of stones down. At this time, Lin Xiao immediately appeared. She flew backward and leaped onto a tree branch. With a wave of her hand, a black flame was thrown out. It pounced in the direction of the giant crocodile. The surrounding hurricane immediately sucked in her flames and began to circle around the giant crocodile as it shrank. Roar! When it saw the appearance of the black flame, the giant crocodile immediately became vigilant. It raised its head high and opened its mouth wide, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. Its head swayed from side to side. Its tail also swung left and right uneasily, slapping the ground. The flame began to spread to the giant crocodile's body. The giant crocodile immediately began to become agitated. It fiercely rushed down the hill with a wave of tremors. Bang, bang, bang. Lin Xiao's black flame began to touch its tail, and then began to burn along its tail. Roar! When the battle began on the other side, Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed slightly. He took the time to glance in this direction. Then, he continued to strike lightning at the giant tortoise shell. However, although the lightning struck the energy shield on the tortoise shell, it was unable to break it for a while. Moreover, the turtle began to run at a rapid speed, rushing in the direction of the lake. Even Xiao Liqing's earth-type ability could not stop its barbaric charge. This was because the raised mud wall was directly smashed. Even if it wanted to dig a hole to bury it, this guy's speed and reaction were not slow at all. It could even make a sharp 90-degree turn in an instant. Chapter 753. The alligator snapping turtle realized that the humans attacking it were very powerful. It realized that its defense might not last long. Therefore, it turned around and ran. It ran in a barbaric and direct manner. It was fast and did not turn. Its thick and hard shell charged forward. Like a heavy bulldozer, it smashed away the rocks and trees that were blocking its way in front of it. This guy is going to run. Don't let it run into the water. Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed, and he immediately chased after it. However, this alligator snapping turtle was not only big and sturdy, but it was also very agile. His running speed was very fast. When he saw a slope, he would rush up, and when he saw a pit, he would run around it. It turned a blind eye to the abilities of Wu Qingyue and the others behind it. No matter what kind of abilities they were, it directly defended itself. Wu Qingyue's thunder attack landed on its back, but it was blocked by the energy shield. They attacked and chased all the way, and they had to stop the big turtle from running to the shore of West Lake. Therefore, after an hour, Wu Qingyue and the others on one side were chasing a big turtle, while Lin Xiao was chasing a prehistoric giant crocodile on the other side. If the two amphibious giants were in the past, they would definitely fight when they met. However, they did not fight today. They were happy to see the familiar figures. That's right, they both sensed each other's aura and rushed toward each other. Bang! After the alligator snapping turtle and the giant crocodile bumped their heads, they immediately formed a back-to-back position and faced both sides at the same time. The former enemies had now become companions. The few mutant beasts did not think too much. They just wanted to chase away these foreign invaders first. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were more than 100 meters apart from each other. Between the two groups were two huge mutant beasts. For a moment they all stopped moving. TSK, we actually bumped into each other. Lin Xiao raised her hand and covered her forehead with a pained expression. She clearly wanted to avoid this guy, but she did not expect to be brought to Wu Qingyue. by chasing the giant crocodile. Although she had already sensed the aura of Wu Qingyue and the others chasing after the big turtle from afar, Lin Xiao did not intend to give up on the giant crocodile just because of Wu Qingyue. Therefore, Lin Xiao was already mentally prepared when the two sides met. But when he saw Wu Qingyue's smiling handsome face, Lin Xiao couldn't help but feel a toothache. Yes, that's right. It was a toothache. Hey, there's a flower on that turtle's back. Qiu Lily landed beside Lin Xiao in a flash and stared at the beautiful purple flower on the back of the giant tortoise curiously. Twin mutant species? Lin Xiao sized up Wu Qingyue's prey and said, "There is an electric current flashing in the middle of that purple flower. It should be the lightning element that Wu Qingyue is looking for." The turtle's shell had a very thick energy shield. It seemed to be a defensive type. No wonder they haven't taken down these two mutants after such a long time. It seems that his lightning can't break their turtle shells. Compared to the alligator snapping turtle, which was fine, the giant crocodile was in a miserable state. The hard scales on its back and the ferocious protruding edges had traces of being corroded by something. There were also large and small cuts on its skin. Although it wasn't fatal, it looked a little horrible. However, the giant crocodile's aura didn't weaken. Instead, it became more violent. Are these two mutant beasts going to join forces? No, it's not two, it's three. On Wu Qingyue's side, Emily stood on a big rock and looked at the two giant beasts from afar. She wasn't a combatant, so she could only watch from afar. These mutant beasts aren't stupid. They know to ask for help when they can't win. Xiao Liqing appeared beside her and nodded in agreement. Then he looked at her and said, "Don't get too close. It won't be good if you get accidentally hurt." Emily looked at him expressionlessly and said, "I'm not that weak." Although she was a psychic, her physical strength wasn't bad either. It was more than enough for her to protect herself. Well, if only there was a way to break the turtle's energy shield. Our attacks didn't work. I didn't expect that even your psychic ability wouldn't work. Xiao Liqing sighed and said, looking at the other's prey, although it was also a huge monster, its attacks were still somewhat effective. Now that the two monsters were mixed together, both sides could only temporarily stop fighting. They couldn't just randomly attack without any discussion. Otherwise, who would be responsible if they killed it? It seems that your turtle's defense is very special. Haven't you found a way to break it? Lin Xiao brought Qiu Lily and the others closer. Wu Qingyue and the others also approached. That's right. It's immune to all attacks. Even psychic attacks can't penetrate its energy shield. Do you have any ideas? Wu Qingyue looked at Lin Xiao with a smile. His beautiful long and narrow eyes were slightly squinted into crescent moons. His beautiful lips curved into a perfect curve. If you guys don't have any ideas, what can we do? Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently. She continued, "We won't attack your big turtle. We only want our crocodile." As if in protest of Lin Xiao's words, the alligator snapping turtle on the other side opened up its energy shield. Then it enveloped the 20-meter-long crocodile. It seemed to be telling Lin Xiao that it was impossible to attack one of them separately. If they wanted to attack, they had to attack all three of them together. Wu Qingyue smiled and pointed at the three monsters. This seems a little difficult. Lin Xiao turned his head and looked. Qiu Lily appeared beside Lin Xiao and said, "It seems that if we want to catch our prey, we have to help them open the energy shield first." While Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue were still discussing, the crocodile and the big turtle had already changed their direction. The two giant monsters lined up side by side. Two huge ferocious heads stared fiercely at them with two pairs of fierce eyes. Roar! The alligator snapping turtle raised its front legs agitatedly and kept stomping left and right on the ground. His head was slightly raised as he stared at everyone's position. It looked like it was ready to rush over and fight. The crocodile next to it was the same. It kept swinging its huge tail and slapping the ground behind it. The crocodile opened its mouth slightly. The two rows of saw teeth on the top and bottom were as thick as a baby's arm. They shone with a cold light, showing off its terrifying bite force. Roar! Then the two giant monsters changed from defense to offense. They roared and raised their front legs, stomping on the ground, and rushed toward Wu Qingyue and the others. Oh, they're attacking. Qiu Lily saw the situation and immediately swung the two ponytails in her hands behind her. Her eyes were bright as she stared at the two giant monsters that were rushing over with a violent momentum. Chapter 754. Why don't you try out the turtle's defense? Qiu Lily turned to look at Lin Xiao. Even Wu Qingyue's lightning and spirit abilities were ineffective, so normal abilities wouldn't work. She just didn't know if Lin Xiao's devour ability would work. Lin Xiao turned to look at her, then looked at Wu Qingyue. You can try. Wu Qingyue nodded and waved a finger at the incoming beasts. Lin Xiao retracted his gaze, and with a wave of his hand, he threw out a black curtain of fire towards the two giant beasts that were charging towards him. Whoosh! The black fire immediately engulfed the two running beasts. The crocodile, who had experienced the black fire before, subconsciously paused when it saw the black fire engulfing the sky. He raised his head and looked at the black flames with fear. Then, he looked expectantly at the big turtle beside him. Seeing that the black flames above had blocked out the surrounding light, the big tortoise also raised its head to take a look. A dark light flashed in its eyes, and the layer of energy on its body became brighter. Lin Xiao waved her hand, and the black fire was immediately suppressed. It covered the top of the two beasts, and at this time, the two beasts also rushed to the tree in front of them. Boom! A loud noise sounded. Lin Xiao and the others retreated a step in advance and scattered on the surrounding trees and rocks. The big turtle and the crocodile rushed up together and collided with them, then immediately calmed down. However, their bodies were now covered by Lin Xiao's dark fire on their energy shields. Her dark fire was quickly absorbing the energy on the energy shield. If she had more time, she could indeed break the big turtle's shield. However, these two were living creatures, so they obviously wouldn't stay here and let her attack them. They would run. Sure enough, after a moment of silence, the giant tortoise began to rampage around aimlessly, as if it had lost its target. Kacha! Boom boom boom! Several lightning bolts began to fall from the sky and hit the surrounding trees. It was clearly not Wu Qingyue's lightning bolt, but the lightning flower. Roar! Roar! The two mutated beasts let out a manic roar. Lightning strikes began to fall from the sky one after another. Suddenly, Lin Xiao's ears twitched as if he had heard something. She immediately leaped onto the tallest tree at the side and carefully listened to the strange sound that came from afar. Hoo hoo hoo, hua 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 rumble. The sound came from afar. Lin Xiao looked in the direction that it seemed to be from the lake. The sound grew louder and closer. It seemed to be approaching them. What's that sound? Qiu Lily obviously heard it as well. She flew to Lin Xiao's side. He asked blankly. Lin Xiao listened and frowned. He said uncertainly, "It seems like the sound of water?" "What kind of water sound is this?" Qiu Lily asked blankly. She raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. Then, she saw that the edge of the forest in that direction had begun to collapse, as if something was crushing the trees in their direction. "It's a flood." Lin Xiao saw it too. Then he frowned. That's right. The sound was like a flood rushing down, drowning and washing away everything around it. The trees and the others were knocked down by the force. What? Flood? What should we do? We can't let these two big guys run into the water. It'll be difficult to catch them. Qiu Lily's eyes widened and said in surprise. Lin Xiao's figure flashed and appeared beside Wu Qingyue. These two are attracting the flood here. We have to get rid of them as soon as possible. Flood? Wu Qingyue was also shocked when he heard that. He immediately looked around and heard some sounds coming from afar. He returned to Lin Xiao and asked, "Do you have any ideas?" "I can only put them into the space for the time being, but I have to put both of them in together," Lin Xiao said with a frown. Before they met, she didn't want to put the alligator snapping turtle into the space to trap and kill it. Moreover, the alligator kept running and was very strong. If it didn't stop, she wouldn't be able to put it in. So she thought that it would be fine to kill it outside. As long as it didn't run back into the lake, it should be fine. Can you put them into the space? This turtle is level 7, and there are 2 of them. Can you suppress them? Wu Qingyue looked at her with some doubt. It wasn't that he didn't believe in Lin Xiao's ability, If it was one, he believed that she could suppress it. But there were two of them. The combined energy of two such high-level mutated beasts was comparable to a level 8 or 9 mutated beast. He was afraid that her space would explode. Let's take them one by one, Lin Xiao said indifferently. Her figure flashed and rushed towards the center of the lightning. Wu Chungyue stretched out his hand from behind her and beckoned all the lightning bolts towards him. He didn't let any more lightning fall there. At this time, because they were covered by the black fire, the collision of the two caused them to separate slightly. Lin Xiao flashed and appeared on the back of the giant alligator. She stepped on the back of the alligator and squatted down. She grabbed the alligator snapping turtle's back and sent it into the space. Bang dash! A loud sound came from the forest in the space. At the same time the ground shook. The mushroom spirit and Wang Shi, who were running in circles without feeling tired, were suddenly shocked by the giant alligator that fell from the sky in front of them. All of them stopped moving at the same time. Lin Xiao flashed, and the giant alligator on her body disappeared. Her figure flashed again, and she flew toward the giant tortoise. The big turtle abruptly discovered that its companion's aura had suddenly disappeared. Its aura faltered, and its body also came to a halt. It turned its head to the side. Then, before it could see where its companion went, it felt that its energy shield was invaded. Lin Xiao looked at her hand strangely as it passed through the energy shield of the big turtle and touched the shell of the big turtle. Ha! While Lin Xiao was surprised, he quickly sent the big turtle into the space. Not to mention that these two giants would cause pressure to her space. There was no pressure at all. Besides these two, there was still a group of them in her space. Not to mention the number of zombies of different levels. Just the mushroom spirit, Dahe, and Wang were all level 6. If the energy could burst the space, it would have exploded. At least Lin Xiao didn't feel anything. She could even suppress a level 8 paranormal. And these two mutated beasts were only level 7 and not level 7. It was nothing. Lin Xiao felt that her space was not limited by these mutant level energy. As long as she didn't die, the space should not explode one day. Chapter 755. The four in the forest in Lin Xiao's space were confused, and then there was another loud noise. Bang! The mushroom spirit and the alligator snapping turtle, who were staring at each other, were shocked back to their senses by the sound of the big turtle falling. The mushroom spirit's reaction was the fastest. She turned around and ran away, disappearing in a flash. The big crocodile in front was staring at the mushroom spirit, and the big black snake in front of it. It turned its head to look at the big turtle's movement. It found that its partner had also fallen into this strange place. The alligator snapping turtle was a little dizzy after being thrown from a high place, but it quickly came to its senses. It looked around and found that it was a strange place. It looked around anxiously, looking left and right. It found that there was no energy in the air that it could control. The alligator snapping turtle couldn't use its energy shield. It panicked and wanted to turn a few rounds on the spot, but it found that it couldn't turn. And its posture, because its body was too big, it was stuck by the surrounding trees. And it was stuck on its side. On its side. Roar! The big crocodile roared at it. Although the big crocodile was thinner, it was also stuck at this time. It twisted its body violently, struggled with its four legs, and swung its thick and long big tail. But it still couldn't get its body out of the trees. Woof! Wang looked at the two strange creatures strangely, and didn't care about the mushroom spirit anymore, because it had been attracted by the two fresh Big Macs. Perhaps Big Black had sensed that the aura of these two giants was stronger than itself, so it had curled up into a pitch-black lump. It straightened its neck and raised its head, staring at the two dangerous existences with its long, narrow, and cold snake-like eyes. It didn't know why its master brought these two in. Was it going to catch them to be its partners? Dahe turned its head to look in the direction where the mushroom spirit disappeared, and thought silently. There were a lot of new partners coming in today. Oh, it's stuck. That's good. It saves me a lot of trouble. Lin Xiao appeared at this time, and smiled when he saw the situation in front of him. It couldn't be helped. The distance between each tree in this forest wasn't very wide. The size of these two crocodiles was a bit too big. Even the slender crocodiles were stuck in their fat stomachs. Even though they were struggling with their 4 legs, it was of no use. On the other side, the big tortoise was even more miserable. Looking at the alligator snapping turtle that was stuck in the middle of the tree, Lin Xiao's smile widened as he looked at the alligator snapping turtle that was stuck in the middle of the tree. Crackle! The thunder flower on the alligator snapping turtle's back swayed, and tiny electric currents flickered in the middle of the flower. It seemed like it wanted to summon lightning, but it seemed to be broken. Flashing back and forth, nothing appeared in the sky. Lin Xiao leaped onto the side of the snapping turtle's shell, which was erected high up, and squatted down to examine the thunder flower on its back. The crocodile on the other side was also struggling, but after struggling for a while, it began to open its mouth wide. The moment these mutant beasts opened their mouths, it seemed like they were about to release their abilities. When Lin Xiao saw this, he immediately jumped away from the tortoise. Landing on a tree branch behind the crocodile, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the crocodile. Puff! Hua 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 hua! Then, the big crocodile's mouth spewed out a large stream of water. The water was very rapid, and the force was very strong. It immediately pushed Dahei and Awang away. Only then did the 2 of them react. Some climbed up the tree, while the others were washed away by the water. Dahei climbed up the tree next to it, and Wang, who didn't know how to climb trees, was washed away. Awo. Lin Xiao frowned and slightly clenched her fist. Then, the water in the crocodile's mouth immediately became smaller. This crocodile turned out to be of the water attribute, and it actually didn't come out before. While trying her best to suppress the big crocodile, she turned her head to look at the alligator snapping turtle that was still struggling. It would have been fine if she hadn't looked, but when she did, she discovered that the position of the beautiful purple flower on the back of the alligator snapping turtle had shifted. Pitter-patter-boom. The purple flower was originally in the middle of the turtle's shell, but now, because of the alligator snapping turtle's posture, the flower slowly climbed to the high place where Lin Xiao had been standing, which was the side of the shell where the alligator snapping turtle was standing. A small bolt of lightning still appeared, but it was aimed randomly at the surroundings and bombarded randomly. After the first bolt, the second one began to appear. Pitter patter 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 patter. Although the lightning was as thin as a thumb, it would explode if it hit the surrounding trees or the ground. If it hit the ground, it would create a small hole, but if it hit the trees, it would just be a puff of green smoke, and nothing would happen. The big crocodile was suppressed by Lin Xiao, and the water that spewed out of its mouth slowly disappeared. Only a large puddle in front of them and Awang, who was still flopping in the water in some corner, were left. Lin Xiao turned her head and raised her other hand in the direction of the thunder flower. Her 5 fingers slightly clenched and began to press down. Soon, the commotion caused by the thunder flower gradually died down, and the lightning disappeared. Big Black, go up and bite that flower. Lin Xiao suddenly shouted to Big Black, who was coiled up on another tree. Dahei's eyes flashed coldly, and then it slid out of the branch and stretched its long head to another tree. Just like that, he slid from the trees one by one until he reached one of the trees with the alligator snapping turtle stuck in it. Then he slid down. It opened its mouth and pounced on the purple flower. At this time, Wu Qingyue was retreating with his men. Although the 3 mutated beasts had been subdued by Lin Xiao, they were not as strong as Lin Xiao. However, the flood from afar did not stop. It was still rushing towards them. If they continued to stay here, even if they were not washed away by the flood, the trees under their feet would be washed away by the flood. However, their speed was not slow. The people that Wu Qingyue brought in were all level 5 or 6 arcanists, with the lowest being level 4. His physical movements were fast and nimble. On Lin Xiao's side, even Shen Yuzhen, who had the highest level, was able to escape with a swishing sound. It was not a problem at all. Fortunately, the flood was still far away, and the front wave did not have the push from the back wave. After Lin Xiao put the 2 giants into his space and cut off the connection, the follow-up force of the flood disappeared. Therefore, although the momentum in front had not stopped, It was not as fast as before. When the flood reached the place where Lin Xiao had put the 3 mutant beasts, the water force had decreased a lot. Meanwhile, Wu Qingyue and the others had quickly retreated from the forest and rushed to the top of another mountain. They did not leave. Instead, they quietly waited on the top of the mountain for Lin Xiao to appear. Qiu Lily and the others did not leave either. They stayed separately from Wu Qingyue and the others. What do you guys think? Turtle meat or crocodile meat is better? Qiu Lily sat on a rock and played with the tail of her hair. She was bored and asked a question. Chapter 756. In the space, Lin Xiao suppressed the crocodile and the thunder flower's superpower attacks, and let Dahe deal with the lowest level flower. Dahe climbed to the top of the thunder flower and pounced on the flower that could no longer send out thunder strikes. It opened its mouth and bit the flower with a pair of sharp curved teeth. Puff! With a soft sound, the beautiful purple flower was bitten into pieces by Dahe. Dahe raised its head slightly and was about to swallow the flower directly. Wait a minute, don't swallow it. Lin Xiao quickly stopped it. Dahe stopped raising its head. Then it lowered its head slightly with the bitten flower corpse in its mouth and looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Just bite it to death. Don't eat it, Lin Xiao said to it. Dahe opened its mouth. Patter, the flower corpse, which had lost its vitality, fell to the ground. Come here and bite it. Lin Xiao pointed to the crocodile under her hand and waved to Dahe. Dahe immediately slipped down from the tree and turned into a black shadow flashing toward the crocodile. The big crocodile immediately sensed the crisis and turned its head. It opened its mouth and wanted to bite the big black snake that rushed toward it. Of course, the big black snake would not directly attack the crocodile's big mouth. Instead, it turned its head and slid to the side. It went directly to the back of the crocodile and attacked it from behind. Seeing that the big crocodile was temporarily suppressed, Lin Xiao stopped. She flashed to the corpse of the flower and narrowed her eyes to look outside. Well, if she went out now, she would be drowned by the water. So Lin Xiao gave up going out temporarily. She would first kill the 2 big crocodiles and then go out. The water outside would be shallower. The stuck big crocodile was badly bullied by Dahe. However, its skin was thick and its belly was not exposed. Dahe couldn't kill it at the moment, so it could only go around its back and bite its butt. The big tortoise standing on its side saw that the purple flower was dead, but it didn't react. After struggling for a few times, it found that it couldn't get rid of the purple flower, so it shrank its head and feet into the shell. Lin Xiao glanced at the tortoise and thought that she would ask Wu Qingyue for the big tortoise later. She would give him the energy core and take the tortoise's body. While Lin Xiao was waiting for the water to subside, Wu Qingyue and the others were waiting for Lin Xiao to come out. On the other side, the black dragon base was in a miserable state. Gao Haoyan left? He actually gave up on this place. In the conference hall of the underground base, Du Kuanxing looked at the huge screen in front of the conference hall with a dark expression. The screen was divided into more than 10 smaller screens, each with a different image. It reflected the smoke and ruins of a large battlefield. Countless buildings had been destroyed, trees had been blown up, and there was black smoke everywhere. There was not a single trace of a human in the image. There were only countless zombies walking around. In addition to Du Kuanxing, there were other managers of the base in the conference room. They just drove the helicopter away from here. Leader Gao Haoyan also left in the helicopter. A man in a military uniform stood by the side of the screen and pointed at one of the small screens with a gloomy expression. Du Kuanxing coldly stared at the small screen. After a long silence, he lowered his voice and said, "Who else wants to leave? You can leave now. From now on, this underground base will be sealed. It will be at least a month before we can open it." The reason he said at least was because the food stored underground was only enough for this many people to eat for a month. After a month, if the zombies did not retreat, then they would have to go out and face the endless number of zombies again. Only then would they be able to find food and continue to survive. Not leaving. Even if we want to leave, we have to wait for a month. Maybe these zombies will retreat soon. Someone firmly shook his head. What if they stay up there and refuse to leave? Du Kuanqing's voice was a bit hoarse, and his expression was very serious. We'll see then. Someone sighed and said. Right now there was still an underground base that allowed them to hide here. They were not willing to leave until the last moment. Gao Haoyan took his subordinates who were still alive and drove the helicopter back to Wuxia base. However, not long after they left, Mo Yen began to retreat with the zombies. Those that retreated with him were all high-level zombies. The ordinary zombies were still wandering aimlessly in the Black Dragon base. But without the high-level zombies, it was still very easy for Du Kuanqing to clear out the ordinary zombies. He just needed some time to clear out a large piece of land. At this time, the people in Wuxia base had a strange expression on their faces. This was because Gao Haoyan was heading towards their base. Logically speaking, if Gao Haoyan were to join them at this time, they would have gained an expert. However, this Gao Haoyan could not even protect his own base. This meant that the zombies in the Black Dragon base were indeed very scary. If it was just a natural zombie wave, then it would be fine. But if it was caused by Gao Haoyan and the others, then if he were to join Wuxia base, would he also attract the zombies? Wuxia's information was not clear whether this zombie wave was natural or caused by someone. If this zombie wave was caused by someone, then it must be a zombie emperor that is above level 8. Moreover, there are many level 2 kings among them. Han Shao slightly lowered his eyes and said, although his intelligence did not find out whether the zombie tide was natural or triggered, it was not clear from his intelligence. However, he was still able to find signs of several level 2 kings moving around. Only zombie emperors and above could control level 2 kings. But if this zombie wave was caused by a zombie emperor, then Gao Haoyan could lead it to Wuxia. It was not to say that Wuxia was afraid of the zombie emperor, but it was still a big problem. If they were to face a zombie wave, they would have to pay a heavy price. If it's a zombie emperor, then why don't we ally with the other bases and invite a few experts to deal with it? Wei Haichao suggested. I think that's a good idea. If it really is a zombie emperor, then we can't let it continue to grow. The stronger it becomes, the greater the threat it will pose to humanity. However, the only ones that have the ability to fight are Sea City and Skyfire base. The new Green Mountain base is so far away from us. I'm afraid we won't make it in time. Han Shao nodded. Don't forget about Gao Haoyan. He is an 8th level talent. It's just a zombie emperor, Gao Haoyan, and Wu Qingyue should be enough to deal with it. Si Kongchun said expressionlessly. The others looked at each other. A zombie emperor needed 3 of their strongest adepts to deal with. Although they felt like they were making a mountain out of a molehill, this was the only way they could be confident. The other level 2 kings with our current weapons can't kill them. Although he couldn't kill them, he could still stop them. There's no need to worry about a zombie wave. Hong Yijia, one of the directors in charge of the base's safety, spoke up. Chapter 757. Not long after, Gao Haoyan brought his helicopter fleet to the Wuxia base. The Wuxia base seemed to be ready to welcome his arrival. They directly let their fighter jet land in the airspace of the Wuxia base. Therefore, after another round of discussion, in order to get Gao Haoyan to willingly join China's base, Si Kongchun used the excuse of discovering the zombie emperor to prevent him from continuing to grow and become a threat to humanity, and once again sent out invitations to other bases. Of course, it wasn't just Haiqing and Skyfire that were invited. This time, all the bases were invited. Meng Clan, Qingshan base and Sentient base all received the news. When Lin Xiao came out of the space, she tossed the energy core and the purple flower to Wu Qingyue. No matter how powerful the turtle's energy shield was, when it couldn't use its energy shield, Lin Xiao's claws directly cut through the soft shell on the side of the turtle, directly cutting the big turtle in half. Wu Qingyue took the core and didn't say anything. When he saw that Lin Xiao wasn't going to kill any more mutants, he followed her back to Sentient base. His reason was clear, he wanted to pick up his daughter. Back at Sentient base, Lin Xiao received news from Xiedong about Black Dragon base and Mo Yen. On the other side, Wu Qingyue received the same news. Is China going to gather all of its forces to deal with Mo Yen? In the living room of the All-Being base, Lin Xiao brought his people, Wu Qingyue, and the others to sit in the living room, discussing this matter. If this zombie emperor is allowed to grow, the other bases will probably end up like the Black Dragon base. Yuan Tianqing lowered his head and frowned. Then he raised his head and looked at Wu Qingyue. What do you think, Leader Wu? China is just trying to get Gao Haoyun to join them. They say they're going to deal with the zombie king. But that's because they think China will have to pay a higher price. That's why they want to drag everyone down with them, Wu Qingyue said. The smile on his face was faint, and it was hard to tell what he was thinking. That's why they don't want to put in too much effort. That's why they want us to deal with the zombie king, and its horde for the sake of humanity. Is he trying to get us to help him out of our own free will? Si Kongqin's thinking is too easy. Lin Xiao sat on the sofa with her legs crossed, leaning lazily against the back of the sofa. She said with an indifferent expression, he invited all the bases in the country. If a base doesn't send a representative, after this incident, the base in China will denounce the base that didn't contribute. Wu Qingyue said with a smile, but there was no smile in his crescent moon-like eyes. If that's the case, we have to go. Lin Xiao curled his lips and said, go and be their gun. Yuan Tianqing looked at Wu Qingyue and then at Lin Xiao. He said with an uncertain expression, we can go, but who should we send and how are we going to make a move? I can't say for sure. Lin Xiao glanced at Wu Qingyue. The main purpose of the other party was to invite this expert over, but they felt that it was impossible to invite him alone, so they sent out an invitation. Even if the others went, they would only be supporting characters. Since they've already sent the invitation to our base, we'll just send 2 people to go through the motions. It has nothing to do with us anyway, Lin Xiao said to Yuan Tianqing. Then she stood up and said to Wu Qingyue, I think if Leader Wu doesn't go, China will be troubled. So you should hurry back to your base to prepare. Take care, I won't send you off. You're in such a hurry to chase me away? I don't think that's a good idea. Wu Qingyue smiled at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao raised her eyebrows and said, I'm just reminding you that you have a lot of things to do. I'm afraid you'll be delayed. Since you're not in a hurry to leave, the ones who should be in a hurry should be the people from China. I won't be accompanying you, you can go ahead. After she finished speaking, she stood up and walked out of the living room with her long legs clattering in her military boots. Mo Yan, who left with Gao Haoyun, went through this revenge hunt. The purple light in his eyes flashed with a hint of violence, and his aura began to become unstable. Originally, he didn't want to kill everyone in Black Dragon's base. The zombie wave was just to cover their tracks and lure Gao Haoyun out. Gao Haoyun was hiding very well, and he couldn't find him. That was why he thought of the zombie wave. He didn't think that when Gao Haoyun came out, he would get on a helicopter and fly away. As for the rest of the survivors in the base, who knew where they were hiding, Mo Yan didn't care about them. He just wanted Gao Haoyun's life. However, after the zombie wave, Mo Yan's heart became more and more restless. She couldn't help but want to lose her temper and hit him. She was in a bad mood. So when Gao Haoyun got on the helicopter and ran away, Mo Yan's anger rose, and he became even more restless. However, he still suppressed his anger and chased after Gao Haoyun's helicopter. No matter how far he went, he wouldn't let Gao Haoyun go. Roar dash! After running for more than 300 kilometers per hour for 2 days, he finally reached the vicinity of China's base. Mo Yan stopped and immediately waved his hand. Kacha kacha, boom 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 boom, boom dash! His body was surrounded by countless lightning bolts, causing smoke and dust to fly everywhere. Suppressing the restlessness in his heart, Mo Yan randomly exploded for a while before gradually calming down. After he calmed down for more than 10 minutes, a dozen figures flashed behind him. Mo Yan found a clean place to sit down, and waved for the female zombie to come over. The level 5 female zombie gently walked to Mo Yan's side, raised her hand and touched his shoulder, and activated her ability. A faint white light came out from the gap between the female zombie's hand, but more of it seeped into Mo Yan's body. The floating veins on Mo Yan's face gradually calmed down after the white light from the female zombie. At this time, the veins on Mo Yan's face didn't only cover half of his face, they were getting bigger and bigger. and even the other side of his handsome face was covered. Right now, his entire face was covered with these strange veins. Every time he went berserk, the purple veins on his face would seem to come alive and become strange and scary. At this time, Mo Yen didn't look like that evil handsome face from before, but looked like a demon. As the female zombie touched him for a long time, the veins on Mo Yan's face would gradually shrink back. 2 hours later, Mo Yan's incomparably handsome face finally appeared. The veins on his face had all retreated below the left side of his neck. His expression was cold. This was his usual expression. He calmly raised his hand and waved at the female zombie. The female zombie immediately retracted her ability and quietly retreated to the side. This was also the reason why Mo Yen had to agree to Lin Xiao's retreat. He couldn't live without this female zombie. Chapter 758. Wu Qinghua finally got the chance to pick up Lingling and stay in the base. How could he return to his base just because of a random order from China? He told Xiao Liqing to reply to China. He's busy and doesn't have time to deal with the zombie emperor. Just let him grow. Anyway, the zombie emperor wants to deal with China, not Haiqing. Xiao Liqing looked at his leader with a black face. Leader, if you reply like this, you'll get revenge. Wu Qinghua smiled and waved his hand. It's fine if it's a small fight, I'll take it. Even if it's a big one, it won't dare to do anything serious. The most important thing for him now was to get his zombie wife. He didn't have time to care about China or the zombie emperor. In any case, the zombie emperor didn't come here. Xiao Liqing had a helpless expression. If his leader wanted to be stubborn, he couldn't do anything about it. Lin Xiao, who was hiding in her office, looked at Xie Dong and said, "What? He's not going. Wouldn't China be sad? They obviously wanted him to be their main force. If he went, they would definitely give him a lot of benefits. Why didn't he go?" Xie Dong looked at her and shook his head. He didn't understand why Wu Qinghua would reject China's invitation. He didn't even go back to Haiqing and stayed in the base as if nothing had happened. Lin Xiao frowned because Wu Qinghua was annoyed that he was staying in the base. What's the situation in the Black Dragon base? She leaned back on her chair and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Xie Dong said in a hoarse voice, "It's divided into 2 groups. One group stayed in the Black Dragon's underground base, while the other group fled the base. When Gao Haoyan left, he didn't bring the survivors with him. However, there were many who felt that there was no hope and escaped. According to the information obtained from the survivors who escaped, after the zombie wave broke out, the number of people who died was not small. The number of casualties was about 50,000. The number of people who escaped is uncertain. The damage to the buildings in the Black Dragon's base wasn't that great, but the ordinary zombies didn't retreat when the corpse tide rushed in." Lin Xiao listened to the news and asked, "Gao Haoyan's departure must have disappointed the survivors. Who led the remaining survivors?" "The other leader is Du Kuanxing and his subordinates. There should be quite a number of survivors left," Xie Dong replied. "It seems like they want to hide underground for a period of time and wait for the corpse tide to calm down before coming out to rebuild their base." Lin Xiao could roughly guess the mentality of the survivors who would rather hide underground. Mo Yan let Gao Haoyan leave just like that? She asked curiously. With Mo Yan's ability, even a helicopter could be struck down by lightning. How could he let the other party slip away so easily? Speaking of Mo Yan, Xie Dong's expression became a little hesitant. Mo Yan's situation seems a little strange. "Oh, what's wrong?" Lin Xiao asked curiously. On the day Gao Haoyan left, Mo Yan did send down quite a lot of lightning. However, the lightning bolt that he sent down was not aimed at Gao Haoyan's helicopter. The lightning bolt that descended at that time was very unstable. Also, the frequency is sometimes fast and sometimes slow, and the area of focus is sometimes in the east and sometimes in the west. Although a few helicopters were shot down, they couldn't stop Gao Haoyan's helicopter, Xie Dong said. Then he thought of something and continued. Moreover, the state of his aura seemed to be off at that time. Even the first and second rank king tiers around him all retreated far away. None of them dared to approach him. "What's going on?" "According to what you said, He seemed to have lost control. Lin Xiao looked at him and guessed. I don't know the specifics, but because I didn't dare to get too close, I could only sense from afar. His aura at that time was indeed very unstable, and it was very violent, Xiadong said thoughtfully. Lin Xiao lowered his eyebrows and thought back to the last 2 times he faced Mo Yen. There was nothing wrong with that kid's aura. Why would it become unstable now? Does anyone else know about his situation? Lin Xiao looked at Xiadong and asked. Probably not. The other senses aren't as sharp as ours, Xiadong said. Of course, the senses of humans weren't as sharp as those of zombies. Also, when Mo Yen acted up, his subordinates retreated far away. However, they were guarding him from all directions, and the others couldn't get close. Lin Xiao nodded and said to him, You continue to watch Mo Yan's movements, and also see if there are people from the bases in China who are willing to help. Yes, sir, Xiadong answered, turned around and left. Lin Xiao continued to look at the statistics of the new batch of survivors in his hands. On the other side, Wang Jian, Li Honglin, and Lu Hao had just joined the base 2 days ago. After registering their basic information with Yuan Tianxing, they were all assigned places to stay. We are metahumans, how can we live with these ordinary people? However, when they arrived at the place to stay, they expressed their dissatisfaction. This was because they were actually arranged to live with the ordinary people who came with them before. Although the place was not bad, they originally thought that they were better than others, so they should live in a better area. The soldier who brought them in said impatiently, It's already good enough that you guys are staying. If you want to change places, use your points to exchange. If you have enough points, you can even live on your own. Points? What points? The people who had just arrived were confused. Another soldier who was easier to talk to said, The base's contribution points. Those who contribute to the base will receive points. There's no difference between metahumans and ordinary people here. We are all humans, and those with abilities don't necessarily have to be metahumans. Metahumans don't necessarily bring more benefits to the base. Why not? Us metahumans can go out and hunt. Do you ordinary people dare to go out? The new metahuman said with some dissatisfaction. The soldier pointed to the ordinary people who came with them. Although they can't hunt, they still relied on their own strength to get here. Alright, enough with the nonsense. If you don't want to live here, you can. There's a metal shed below. Do you want to go there? The soldier said impatiently. He hated these metahumans the most, their arrogant attitude. Did they really think that without metahumans, ordinary people couldn't survive? Wang Jian and his subordinates were assigned to the same room, while Li Honglin and the rest were not assigned to the same room. What made Chun Hao happy was that Lu Tong was in the same room as him. But Li Honglin wasn't here, so he didn't have the strength to protect him. When Lu Tong found out that he was assigned to the same room as Chun Hao, he immediately felt a sense of danger. But he couldn't show it. He could only secretly try to find a way to change rooms. Chapter 759. However, after searching for 2 days, he still could not find anyone he knew. Lu Tong could only return to his living quarters dejectedly. The 1,000+ people were also staying in the buildings around the school. Moreover, it was a suite. The living quarters of the other batch of people were quite good, because there were fewer people and more land in the base. The accommodations arranged for them were either inside the school or in the vicinity. What? You want to change rooms? Why? Isn't it better to stay with me? Chun Hao watched Lu Tong return from his room. He knew what Lu Tong was doing. Lu Tong looked around the room and saw that there was no one else around. His expression turned cold. Chun Hao, I know what you're planning. Isn't it because I know about you? However, you should also know that I'm a spatial ability user, and I've already registered here. You better not do anything unnecessary. Lu Tong looked at Chun Hao and said coldly, What unnecessary things? Don't worry, I won't do anything. Rather than guarding against me, you might as well guard against Wang Jian and the rest. Don't forget, it was your idea to capture them to lure the zombies. Chun Hao said with a smile. Even when he was smiling, his ferocious face looked terrifying. The ones who did it were you guys, not me. They should be looking for you guys. I'm under your protection. Lu Tong still had a cold smile on his face, ignoring Chen Hao's words. He was a space-type ability user, a rare resource that was protected in every base. This was because when the base sent people out to collect resources, they would always find a spatial ability user to bring them out. Protecting him alone was much easier than protecting those trucks. However, Lu Tong was not worried about Wang Jian and the rest. Grudges outside the base could not be brought into the base. In other words, he only needed to avoid Wang Jian and the rest when he left the base to carry out missions. However, Chen Hao was staying in the same room as him, so it was much easier to deal with him in secret. Wang Jian and the rest also knew that they could not kill anyone in the base, so any grudges could only be settled outside. Thus, when Wang Jian and the others saw Li Honglin and the others, they could only watch from the sidelines despite the fact that they wanted to bite them to death. TCH, don't push the blame onto us. In any case, this day will come sooner or later, just wait. At the very least, I won't do anything to you as long as you don't tell anyone about me. I believe you won't say anything. Chen Hao looked at him. His last sentence was a statement. Of course I won't, but if you dare to have any ill intentions towards me, then I can't be sure. Lu Tong nodded. The expression on his pale, handsome face was calm, as if he had really come to terms with Chen Hao. Chen Hao's eyes flickered slightly as he looked at him. He just grinned and didn't say anything else. At this moment someone came in. They were the subordinates Chen Hao had sent out to gather information. The subordinate glanced coldly at Lu Tong before looking at Chen Hao and saying, "Boss, I found out some information." Chen Hao got up, turned around, and went into his room. "Come in." They lived in a suite with 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms, a bathroom, a kitchen and a bathroom. The house was very big, so they arranged for 5 or 6 people to live in it, 2 people to a room. The leader here is very mysterious. She's a woman. According to the others, it's a woman similar to the original leader of the Netherworld King. After entering the room, the subordinate walked up to Chen Hao and whispered, "Women? Mysterious? How mysterious? Does it look like the leader of the Netherfire? Do they look alike or what?" Chen Hao asked with some surprise. "It's a woman. I heard she's very beautiful. I said she's mysterious because she's rarely seen." Most of the matters in this base are handled by Deputy Chief Yuan and Deputy Chief Lin Feng. Although the female leader is very beautiful, she looks different from the leader of the Netherfire. She's very young. I heard she's only in her 20s. Rather than similar, it's more like her temperament and aura. They're both very tough and clean, the subordinate replied. Lu Hao frowned slightly and thought for a moment, then said, "Lin Feng is now the deputy chief?" "That's right." The subordinate nodded and continued. "Not only has he been promoted to deputy chief, but his ability has also risen to rank 7. "What? Isn't it rank 6? Chen Hao was slightly shocked. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at the subordinate. He couldn't believe that Lin Feng's ability was rank 7. It had only been half a year. When Lin Feng escaped from the Netherworld King's base, he had just broken through to rank 6. How did he rise to rank 7 so quickly? "Boss, it's not just Lin Feng. Deputy Chief Yuan has also risen to rank 7. And I heard that this female leader has a group of mysterious subordinates around her. Each of their ability levels aren't low. They're all secretive, just like this female leader," the subordinate said excitedly. Chen Hao was silent for a moment, then said, "No wonder this base could be built so close to Sea City. Looks like this female leader isn't simple. Oh right, have you found out the whereabouts of the Lin family?" "I've found some, but I don't dare to be too brazen. After all, we've just arrived," the subordinate said hesitantly. The subordinate thought for a moment and said cautiously, "Boss, the members of the Lin family are all important figures in this base. Except for Lin Feng, who is the deputy leader. All the members of the Lin family are important figures in this base. Other than Lin Feng, Lin Hao is also one of the heads of the research department and the medical department. There's also Lin Wenwen. She's now the leader of the resource collection team. She's no longer the young mistress who was protected by others. Do you plan to?" He didn't finish the last sentence, only looking at Chen Hao. "It's fine, we're not doing anything big. We just need to do something to make them suspect Lu Tong. We don't need to do anything to Lu Tong. He won't leave the base if we wait for him. Why don't we let the manager of this base deal with him? Chen Hao said with a cold smile. His eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. Then what should we do? Boss, what do you think? But if word gets out, we'll be done for. The subordinate said with some trepidation. Although he didn't agree with Chen Hao's idea, he didn't dare to say it out loud. We don't need to do it, just let Wang Jian do it. All we have to do is do it discreetly, Chen Hao said with a sinister smile. He then had the subordinate lean his ear closer. Come here, I'll tell you. Find a way to lure Lin Feng's daughter out. Chen Hao whispered to the subordinate what to do. On the other side, Lin Xiao was forced by her mother and Lin Wenwen to go to Lin Hao for examination. Mrs. Lin says to Lin Luoran worriedly, I didn't agree with you going to the Tsangyan city, but I know that you won't listen to me when you make a decision. But now you have to think about the child in your belly. Your body is dead, not your life alone. If there's anything, just let Lin Feng and Tian Xing handle it. Pala pala pala. Chapter 760. Lin Wenwen also stares at her belly worriedly and asks, It's been several months, but there's nothing wrong with it. Will it be okay? Big. Boss, are you sure she's okay? It's been 4 or 5 months, but Lin Xiao's belly is still flat, even though she knows it's not an ordinary baby. Seeing that Lin Xiao is always running around, Mrs. Lin, who has nothing to do, starts to worry about her health. So when Lin Xiao comes back this time, Mrs. Lin can't help but take her to Lin Hao for a checkup. She's fine. She can eat and sleep. She's fine. Lin Xiao is speechless. She knows her belly best. However, her family's worry is for her own good, so she can't say anything. You still need to check her regularly. Let Lin Hao check her. He said there's no equipment before. Now that we have found the equipment, we need to check the baby's development. Mrs. Lin looks at Lin Xiao and says, Mom is right. Just listen to me. Let Lin Hao check her. Lin Wenwen echoes Mrs. Lin's words. Okay. I know. Lin Xiao can only sigh and listen to their arrangement. In the future, you'd better come to Lin Hao for a checkup every time you come back. Even if it's not for you, you have to do it for the baby. Mrs. Lin says to her earnestly. When they arrive at Lin Hao's place, Lin Hao is already prepared. He directly asks her to lie down and take off her clothes to show her belly. Of course, there's nothing to be embarrassed about in front of his brother. Lin Hao carefully looks at the condition of her belly with a doctor's attitude. Looking at the picture on the monitor, Lin Hao is a little surprised. Finally, after printing out the film, he points at a small dot on it and says, Look, this is the baby. Judging from the shape, it should have just passed the embryo stage. In other words, it has entered the growth stage. That is, when the pregnancy is 3 months old, it is said to have passed the critical period. And the size is normal, like a normal baby. It was just that in terms of development time it was too slow. By the way, sister, you and that man. Well, it should be last October, right? After talking about the baby, Lin Hao glances at Lin Xiao and asks. Lin Xiao gets up and pulls up her clothes. She takes the film and looks at the small dot on it. Her heart was filled with warmth, causing the corners of her mouth to curl up unconsciously. Hearing Lin Hao's question, the corners of his mouth immediately drooped. He nodded lightly, and Lin Hao looked at her, his handsome face full of curiosity as he said, Who is it? Don't tell me you want to wait until the child's father comes knocking on your door to tell everyone? They had come knocking on his door. Lin Xiao rolled his eyes in his heart, but on the surface he said indifferently, If he really dares to come, then we'll see. Lin Hao also rolled his eyes, exactly the same as Lin Xiao. He said, Don't tell me that they don't know about this child? Aren't you going to tell him? This child is different from normal children. Lin Xiao touched her belly as a gentle light flashed in her eyes. Hearing Lin Xiao's words, Lin Hao's eyes turned cold. She said, Are you afraid that he doesn't want this child? Lin Xiao looked up at him without saying a word. Until now, they still didn't know if the child would be a human or a zombie. If that's the case, then I agree with your idea. Lin Hao's eyes flashed with a faint cold light. Then he suddenly frowned and said, This child doesn't have a heartbeat. Normal children would form a fetal heart in 50 to 60 days. And by this time, there should be a heartbeat. But when he checked the child just now, he didn't hear the sound of the fetal heart beating. What do you mean? Lin Xiao was slightly stunned, then she stared at him closely. Nothing, don't be nervous. Although the child doesn't have a heartbeat, there seems to be no other problems. But this still needs to wait for a while to see how it develops. And before the fetus is formed, the fetal heart will form first, then the fetus. Since the child has already formed, then this heartbeat, maybe it's because of you? Although Lin Hao said so, his expression was full of doubt. Anyway, he didn't understand this kind of situation, and he wasn't an attending physician. Because of Lin Xiao, he found a lot of medical books about this to study, but he could only study some basic ones. But at least now, although the child was developing slowly, it was still growing. This was a good sign. Your situation has been developing in a good direction, but I don't know how long it will take for your child to be born full term. Lin Hao comforted Lin Xiao and changed the topic. Lin Xiao nodded, although he was relieved in his heart. But in the corner of his heart, he still felt a little lost because the child didn't have a heartbeat. Without a heartbeat, would there be no heartbeat in the future? So when little Man was born, it might be a child without a heartbeat. Wouldn't it become a zombie? After coming out, Mrs. Lin and Lin Wenwen immediately leaned over and asked Lin Hao anxiously, "How is it? Is the child doing well?" Lin Hao glanced at Lin Xiao and saw Lin Xiao nodding calmly. Then he said to Mrs. Lin, "Mom, the child is fine. It's just that the development is much slower than a normal fetus. So I don't know how long it will take for the child to be born. Looking at the current situation, the child has just formed. In terms of time, a normal fetus would need 3 months, but this child would need 5 months. Then there are still 6 months left. In this way, I guess we have to wait for another 10 months or so. Of course, this is just my guess at the moment. The actual situation will have to wait until the child is born." Lin Hao didn't tell them about the situation of the fetus's heart, only the optimistic situation. So it will add up to 15 months? So this child is still much slower than a normal fetus. Lin Wenwen looked at Lin Xiao's flat belly blankly and murmured, "I see. It's okay. As long as the child can be born safely." Mrs. Lin breathed a sigh of relief and then asked, "Are the adults and the child okay?" Lin Hao nodded and said, "The leader's body is fine, and the child is also fine." That's good, that's good. Mrs. Lin was finally relieved. "Well, the examination is done. Let's go back. Don't delay Lin Hao's work. Now the medical department is very busy," Lin Xiao said, and gently held Mrs. Lin's arm as they left Lin Hao's office. After 2 steps, they suddenly remembered the report that said that among the ordinary people who came from Pluto, there was a person who was awakening a superpower. It seemed that 2 days had passed, and he still hadn't awakened. Lin Xiao stopped and turned back to ask Lin Hao, "By the way, where is the person who is still awakening?" Chapter 761. He's in the isolation ward. Lin Hao said, "Let's go and take a look." Lin Xiao said directly. Lin Hao nodded and took her to the direction of the awakening isolation zone. "You guys go back first. I'll be careful." Lin Xiao turned to her mother and said. When they were outside the office, Lin Xiao didn't call her mother and directly talked about the child. Mrs. Lin nodded and understood what Lin Xiao meant. Although she didn't know why Lin Xiao wanted to see the newly awakened person, she didn't disturb her. Lin Xiao glanced at Lin Wenwen, and Lin Wenwen immediately nodded in understanding. He took his mother's hand and led her out. "How's the person now?" Lin Xiao walked with Lin Hao and asked while looking forward. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen, who were guarding outside Lin Hao's office, silently followed behind them. Although he used the energy lake water you gave him to suppress the high temperature, his body temperature is still very high. It's almost 50 degrees. But it's much better than before. But can he really awaken successfully? Will it suppress his awakening? Lin Hao looked at Lin Xiao and said with uncertainty, "Many superpowers failed to awaken because they stayed in the state of high fever for too long. In the end, they couldn't endure the high fever and awakened before the body functions were destroyed. When the body functions were destroyed to varying degrees, it was already too late. The superpower was awakened, but the body was damaged. Therefore, the damaged body couldn't bear the energy after awakening. It would directly explode or spontaneously burn, and many other failures. There were no new superpowers awakened in the base recently. Lin Xiao's lake water didn't seem to be used on adults except for the two children, Lin Xiaolu and Lingling. Lin Xiao didn't know if it could suppress the high fever and awaken the superpower. Let's take a look first, Lin Xiao said. After Lin Xiao and the others walked to the isolation ward, they saw there was an ordinary young man in addition to the guards outside the door. Seeing Lin Xiao and the others coming, the young man immediately stood up from the chair next to him. Dr. Lin, can he awaken successfully? The young man knew that his question was actually meaningless. But if he didn't ask, his heart wouldn't be at peace. This was because everyone knew that the awakening depended on the individual's own situation. No matter how anxious others were, they couldn't help him. Let's wait and see. His condition is stable. His body functions are still running normally. There's no big problem at the moment. By the way, are you his family? Lin Hao comforted the young man. No, we just took care of each other on the way. The young man shook his head. Lin Hao nodded and didn't say anything. Seeing that Lin Hao was no longer speaking, the young man then noticed the three women next to him. He knew Duan Wan, but he did not know Lin Xiao and Xun Yuzhen. However, when he saw Lin Xiao and Lin Hao walking side by side, and even Duan Wan, the former captain of Pluto King's base's personal guards, standing behind them, the young man tactfully did not say anything and retreated to the side. The young man's action. Lin didn't see the youngs. The young man Lin. The young man's Lin didn't Lin. How? Lin Chong Lin. The guard and Chong open one The guard looked at him and smiled. Lin at the guard. He Lin. Bye. Long look. Lin. Chong. Lin. Lin looked at Lin. Lin. He. Lin. Lin. You're lucky today. The young man's eyes widened in surprise. He was just guessing. He didn't expect it to be true. He nodded in agreement. Looks like I'm lucky to be able to see Lin. But Lin is so young. He looked like he was in his 20s. Although Lin Xiao's aura was very strong, she looked much younger than Lu Tianyu, who used to wear all kinds of heavy makeup. After entering the isolation ward, in order to prevent the energy from exploding, the wards in the awakening area were reinforced with protective measures. Lin Xiao and the others stood in front of the glass window and looked inside. I heard that this person was dying. He had a severe flu, a high fever, and he was hungry. He only relied on drinking water to get to our base. I didn't expect him to suddenly awaken when he was about to die. I don't know if he's fated to die, or if he was met by some deity. Lin Hao introduced the man's situation. Lin Xiao stood at the door and squinted at the situation inside. Others were looking at the instruments, but Lin Xiao could see the energy flow in the man's body. She saw an icy blue energy flowing up and down the man's body, and finally converging into a ball in his mind. In addition to this icy blue energy, there was also a familiar green energy mixed in with the icy blue energy. It seemed to be suppressing the speed of its flow. Although the energy core in his mind hadn't taken shape yet, it would eventually take shape when the time was right. As for the explosion or spontaneous combustion, it didn't seem like it would happen. His situation is not serious. If I'm not wrong, he will successfully form an energy core in 2 or 3 days. In 2 or 3 days, it will successfully form an energy core. It might be an ice type. Lin Xiao opened his eyes and said, You can see his situation clearly? And you can tell what element it is? Lin Hao looked at her in surprise. I can see the color of everyone's energy, and I can also see the person inside. I, your leader, am much more powerful than before. Lin Xiao suddenly turned his head and patted Lin Hao's shoulder with a smile. Lin Hao, who didn't know what to say, looked at her silently. Duan Wan, who looked inexplicably confident. Xun Yuzhen, who didn't understand what was going on. Send his detailed report to my office. Lin Xiao turned and left with Duan Wan and Xun Yuzhen. Lin Xiao was even more certain. that her lake water was very helpful to the awakening of humans. She heaved a sigh of relief. Yes, Lin Hao responded. After seeing that there was nothing else, Lin Xiao returned to the hotel. But before she reached her office, she felt Wu Qingyue and Ling Ling's presence inside. Lin Xiao frowned in pain. Her teeth started to hurt inexplicably. No matter how free you are, don't always come to my office, okay? Don't you find it annoying? Lin Xiao returned to her expressionless face as she glanced at Wu Qingyue on the sofa. As usual, Wu Yueling happily pounced towards Lin Xiao, holding a round gray rabbit in her arms. Before Wu Qingyue raised his head to speak, Lin Xiao suddenly changed the topic. She looked at the rabbit in Ling Ling's arms and said, "Hey, this rabbit is fat enough. You can kill it now." Wu Yueling, who suddenly stopped. The gray rabbit in Wu Yueling's arms. Wu Qingyue, who raised his head and was about to speak. Chapter 762. Look at how nervous you are. I'm just kidding. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Yueling with a smile and walked to his desk. Wu Yueling's expression was a bit hesitant. She looked at the rabbit in her arms and then at Lin Xiao. Then she rolled her eyes, put the fat rabbit on the ground, and walked to Lin Xiao. Why don't you go to China? Maybe you can get a lot of good things back this time. Lin Xiao sat on the office chair and didn't start working. Instead, he crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the chair, looking at Wu Qingyue. Wu Qingyue heard from her words that she wanted him to leave. She wanted him to leave quickly. It didn't matter if he went to China or not. Do you hate me? The smile on his face disappeared, and his eyes, which were usually squinted into crescent moons, also opened. He looked at Lin Xiao expressionlessly. His eyes flashed with an unknown light. Lin Xiao was slightly startled, but the expression on his face only flashed. He looked into her eyes and said, "I don't hate you, but I don't like you either. I want to ask you, why did you propose? Don't say it's for little man. You should know that this child is not a normal child. I don't know what she will be like when she is born, but I don't think the chance of her becoming a human is very high." What she meant was that this child was definitely a mutant. Wu Qingyue was a normal man and the leader of a base. If he wanted to raise this mutant child by his side, it would have a great impact on him. Which human survivor in the base would be willing to let their leader raise a mutant child, who might be a zombie or something? Wu Qingyue looked at the door, which was tightly closed, indicating that their conversation in the office would not be heard by others. He looked at Lin Xiao and said, "No matter what she will become, since she has my genes, she is my child. If I can't even protect my own child, what kind of man am I? What's the point of being a leader?" After Wu Qingyue stopped smiling, he looked a lot more serious. His handsome face had a sharp look, and under the calmness in his eyes, there was a faint light floating. He frowned slightly and stared at Lin Xiao. Even if you want to be responsible for this child, I've said it before. You can find other ways to make it up to little man. You don't have to marry me. What's the point of marrying a woman you don't even like?" Lin Xiao looked at him indifferently and said, "Who said I'm going to marry a woman I don't like? Besides, you should at least let little man have a father, right?" Wu Qingyue's heart was slightly moved, and a smile suddenly appeared on his face as he said. The sharpness on his face also disappeared in a flash. He returned to his previous expression of a smiling fox. "You don't even like me, but you still want to marry me. Am I wrong? As for the matter of little man calling him daddy, I didn't say that you can't come and acknowledge her. If she wants to call you father, I don't mind," Lin Xiao said indifferently. Wu Qingyue just looked at her with a faint smile and fell silent. Lin Xiao raised his eyebrows at his inexplicable smile, looked at him indifferently, and said nothing. After the two of them looked at each other for a while, Wu Qingyue suddenly stood up. He slowly walked to Lin Xiao's desk, slightly bent over, spread his hands and leaned on her desk. He lowered his head and leaned his face against Lin Xiao's front. He slowly closed the distance between their faces. Lin Xiao looked at his handsome face without retreating, and her temples slightly twitched. When Wu Qingyue heard Lin Xiao say that he wanted to marry a woman he didn't like, he subconsciously denied it. There was an inexplicable voice in his heart that didn't want to admit Lin Xiao's words. If he didn't like her, Why did he pay so much attention to her? If he didn't like her, why didn't he mind when she forced herself on him for the first time? And why didn't he mind her current zombie identity? Originally, he just thought that he was interested in her and wanted to know more about her. Until he had a second relationship with her, something in his heart had slowly changed. At the same time, his heart also had a desire for this female zombie. After tasting the marrow, he wanted to taste it. The two erotic scenes that often appeared in his mind, and the feeling that his soul had seeped into his bones. That was why he wanted to use the matter of the child to entangle her by his side. So when Lin Xiao said this, his heart slightly moved, and he immediately understood something. Wu Qingyue smiled and moved in front of Lin Xiao, and then his crescent moon eyes refracted a touch of light that people couldn't distinguish, and directly shot into Lin Xiao's green eyes. He curved the corner of his beautiful mouth, and gently said, "Maybe I still don't know what true love is, but I know. At least now I can't ignore your existence here." As Wu Qingyue said this, he raised his right hand and pointed to his heart. His eyes were still tightly locked on Lin Xiao's eyes, wanting to see the emotions in her eyes. Lin Xiao's eyes slightly opened, and there was indeed some emotions in her eyes. She looked at Wu Qingyue in a daze, and then felt that it was inconceivable. Then, her eyes slightly narrowed and she smiled. Lin Xiao didn't move and said, "It can't be? Leader Wu actually fell in love with that female zombie who beat you? And thinking about what I did in the past, it should be annoying, right?" Wu Qingyue straightened up and put down the hand that was pointing at his heart. He looked at her with a smile, and a soft light flashed in his eyes. He said, "If it wasn't because I was raped by you, I would probably have to live alone for the rest of my life. I still have to thank you, no matter who you used to be. I just want the current you." Lin Xiao's whole body trembled from the soft light in his eyes. She couldn't help but rub the goosebumps on her arms, and said with a face of disgust, "Are you also a masochist?" "Sorry, the things I did in the past. Well, I'm not clear-headed. I've forgotten, so please Leader Wu, forget it too." Lin Xiao was referring to the incident where Lu Tianyu raped her. Anyway, she didn't do it. Why did she still have to deal with this mess after such a long time? "You wish. You said that the first time will be offset by the second time. But I haven't agreed yet. So, I think it's not bad for the two of us to live together. Just promise me?" Wu Qingyue looked at her with a smile, then suddenly pointed to Wu Yueling and said, "And Lingling has always wanted you to live with us, right?" Lingling. After saying that, he shamelessly blinked at Wu Yueling in front of Lin Xiao's face. Wu Yueling immediately looked up at Lin Xiao and nodded vigorously. A pair of big eyes sparkled, and looked at Lin Xiao expectantly. Chapter 763. Lin Xiao silently glanced at Wu Yueling, then rolled her eyes at Wu Qingyue. It wasn't the first time that man had played such a shameless trick. She couldn't win an argument against him, so why did he let Ling Ling do it? What happened next made Lin Xiao even more speechless. "I want to sleep with Daddy and Zombie Mommy." Wu Yueling looked at Lin Xiao with her adorable eyes while suddenly saying that in her head. Hearing that, Lin Xiao's expression almost cracked. "What kind of weird idea did you put in Ling Ling's head again?" Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue with discontentment. "What do I mean? What do you mean by weird idea? She's my daughter. Of course, I'm teaching her the right idea." Wu Qingyue narrowed his eyes and smiled while waving at Wu Yueling. Then, he looked at Lin Xiao and said, "You seem to be able to read her mind. You're the first one except for me. So all she can think about now is sleeping with you and me. Why does she want the three of us to sleep together? Who told her that? Would she think about that herself?" Lin Xiao rolled her eyes and said with discontentment. Wu Qingyue looked at her with surprise, then at Wu Yueling. Had the kid ever expressed her thoughts so straightforwardly? Wu Yueling walked to Wu Qingyue's side, held his trousers and raised her head to look at him. Wu Qingyue smilingly scooped Wu Yueling up and said to Lin Xiao, "I just want a mommy. Besides, it's normal for mommy and daddy to sleep together, isn't it? How can that be a weird idea? I won't give up anyway. You need to realize that too." While speaking, he smilingly walked to the couch and sat down. Lin Xiao, who had experienced Wu Qingyue's shameless behavior again, didn't know what to say. Right at that moment, a knock was heard from the door. "Come in." Lin Xiao relaxed her arms, then sat up straight, and started flipping through the files on the desk. She responded with a bland voice. The door was open, but it wasn't Lin Xiao who came in. Xiao Liqing nodded at Lin Xiao, then turned to his chief. Wu Qingyue glanced at him, then stood up from the couch and said, "All right, since Chief Lu is going to start working, we won't disturb you." After saying that, she pulled Wu Yueling out of the room. Wu Yueling glanced back at Lin Xiao, then suddenly curved her little face in a smile. However, it soon disappeared. Lin Xiao and Xiao Liqing, who had just walked in, rolled their eyes together. He had already come to sit in someone else's office, and he still had the nerve to say that he wouldn't disturb them. What the hell? Lin Xiao complained in her head. He came over and said a bunch of ridiculous things, and he still had the nerve to say that he didn't want to disturb them. No one could be as thick-skinned as him. Wu Qingyue felt that if he didn't like her, why would he want to marry her? Previously, he had only found it suspicious that she had suddenly become a completely different person, which was why he had been attracted to her. However, when he had been silently observing her movements, he realized that she had a decisive and unyielding manner. Although her zombie eyes were as black as ink, they were calmly protecting everyone in her camp, or zombies. He was cold and protective of his own people. However, he couldn't do anything about a child. She was fearless in the face of enemies, but she was always at a disadvantage in front of his Lingling. Every time he saw this, he felt that this female zombie was quite cute. She just didn't know when it started. Did his care for her turn into liking her? It seemed that ever since the weird Viney trapped the two of them, his mood had started to change slowly. Wu Qingyue thought about Lin Xiao's slim waist and her smooth and elastic skin. There was also the helpless expression on her beautiful face that she was trying her best to suppress. Thinking about that, Wu Qingyue couldn't help but feel agitated. His blood heated up slightly. But soon he sighed. Lin Xiao wasn't insensitive to feelings. She was just on guard. So, when would he be able to eat her up again? He had been fantasizing all the time. His fiancée could no longer satisfy him. She's so guarded against me. What should I do to win her heart? It's useless to just help her. I want her to like me, not be grateful to her. In the end, I feel like I'm up to something bad. Wu Qingyue walked out and looked at Xiao Liqing as he said, "I've never pursued anyone. How am I supposed to know?" Xiao Liqing shrugged. "I think I still have a long way to go." Wu Qingyue sighed dispiritedly. He felt that it would take him more time and effort to win the beauty back. However, he didn't plan to give up. Time, right? I have time. Time, right? I'll find a way to win her heart. If I can't, time will do the trick. Oh, what do you want to talk to me about? Wu Qingyue paused briefly as he thought of what he wanted to talk about. There's a new change in Wuxia base, said Xiao Liqing. What change? Isn't it just a zombie emperor? Wuxia base is so powerful. Gao Haoyan is also there. Can't they handle it? Wu Qingyue held Wu Yueling's hand and said while walking, "There's a change in the zombie emperor situation. I've received a message. It seems that after the massive zombie attack, violent lightning bolts will strike from the sky from time to time. The lightning bolts aren't stable, and the lightning bolts aren't stable either. I think the lightning-powered zombie emperor seems to be very agitated," said Xiao Liqing. So, Wu Qingyue glanced at him, waiting for him to continue. So based on what we've been seeing, a large number of zombies are gathering toward Wuxia base. The first wave of zombies is from Heilong province, and the second wave is from the cities where Wuxia base is located. We've also found out that apart from Wuxia base, zombies from the surrounding cities have also been gathering toward Wuxia base. That number? I'm afraid. Xiao Liqing wore a serious look while saying the last few words. Surrounding cities? Wu Qingyue paused as he turned to Xiao Liqing and asked for confirmation. If zombies from a few cities gathered together, it wouldn't be as simple as a massive zombie attack. This number added up to more than 10 million. That's right. All zombies from the surrounding cities seem to have been summoned. They're all moving toward Wuxia base. We weren't sure about that at first. We spent 2 days observing them before we confirmed it. Xiao Liqing nodded and said affirmatively. The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared. His eyes sparkled as he said, "If that's true, Wuxia base is in big trouble. Does it have anything to do with the zombie emperor?" "I think so," said Xiao Liqing. "The closer the zombie emperor is to Wuxia base, the larger and larger the zombie army will be. The zombie army has never stopped." Chapter 764. Wu Qingyue fell silent, and after a while he said, "It seems like there are some problems with the zombie emperor." Xiao Liqing looked at him. "Then, should we still go to China?" If that was really the case, then the zombie emperor might really become a threat to humanity, just like what China had said before. If they underestimated the zombie emperor, then China's base would be in danger. They couldn't let the number of survivor bases decrease. Suddenly thinking of something, Wu Qingyue turned his feet, turned around and walked back. "Perhaps she has more information than you," he said. Xiao Liqing followed Wu Qingyue back to Lin Xiao's office and smiled at Shen Yuzhen and Duan Wan. "There's one more thing I forgot to ask your leader. Sorry for the trouble." Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen looked at each other, then looked at Wu Qingyue strangely before knocking on the door. "Come in," Lin Xiao said. Duan Wan opened the door and let Wu Qingyue in. Xiao Liqing looked at them and stood next to Duan Wan. "Your leader is really hard to deal with." Suddenly, Duan Wan looked straight ahead and said quietly, "Huh." Xiao Liqing was silent for a while, then replied softly, "It's business this time." Duan Wan looked at him and didn't say anything. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qingyue, who had returned. He didn't say anything and just stared at him silently. "There's something that I think you should know." Mo Yan's current situation was that he had already destroyed a Black Dragon base. Next would be China. How confident do you think he is? Wu Qingyue walked to the window beside her desk. As he spoke, he glanced out the window. Then he leaned against the window and looked at Lin Xiao. "He's a zombie emperor much stronger than me. He can still control millions of zombies. And a normal summon is enough. As for how confident he is, it's hard to say. China's defense is like iron, and they have so many cannons. It's not like they're weak." Lin Xiao twirled the pen in his hand and said, "That's true. But if they really face millions of zombies, even the cannons will run out one day. If even Wuxia is breached, then will the Ming clan be next?" Wu Qingyue said, "If China couldn't hold out, then it wouldn't just be the Mongolians, but Sea City and Skyfire base." He was afraid that it wouldn't be long before he would also fall into this kind of threat. Lin Xiao looked at him and suddenly said, "What? Have you changed your mind again? Are you going to Wuxia to help? Don't you think there's something wrong with this zombie emperor?" Wu Qingyue just asked. He did not deny or admit that Lin Xiao was going to Wuxia to help. Lin Xiao nodded and said, "So what? This has nothing to do with me. If Wuxia's Ming clan's Heaven Fire's 3 bases are destroyed, do you think Haiqing and this place will be able to escape his clutches?" Wu Qingyue said, "I don't have the obligation to save the entire human race, but if Mo Yan dares to come here again, I will kill him. I won't let him succeed either." Lin Xiao said, "From what you've said, Mo Yan seems to be very confident. You seem to have seen the destruction of those bases." Wu Qingyue looked at her expression and guessed. He could tell from her words that she knew about Mo Yan's situation. It looked like the Chinese base was going to be in a very bad spot. Who knows what will happen in the future? Judging from the current situation, Mo Yan is going to make a big move, and we'll see if China can hold out. It's none of my business if they can't hold out. What if you can't bear it and want to go help, then go. Let's go as soon as possible, Lin Xiao said casually, then looked down at the work report in his hand. Wu Qingyue smiled faintly and shrugged. "That's none of my business. I don't have the obligation to save the entire human race. I'll just take care of Haiqing." With that, he turned and left with Wu Yueling. Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen watched him leave. After walking for a few meters, Wu Qingyue put away the smile on his face and ordered with a slight frown, "Keep an eye on the situation in China and Mo Yan's situation." "Understood." Xiao Liqing nodded. In the following days, Lin Xiao stayed in the base to deal with all kinds of matters. At the same time, he increased the strength of the zombies in the space. At the same time, he took care of the cultivation base and the human base. Although it had always been Yuan Tianxing who did it, he was also very busy with all the big and small things. Moreover, ever since Qiao Lin rejected him, Yuan Tianxing wanted to kill himself at work. Lin Wenwen often watched him from afar, and didn't disturb him when he was working. However, he would always appear in the wee hours of the morning, when Yuan Tianxing fell asleep on his desk, and put a blanket over him. Then he would leave silently. The other departments in the base gave Lin Xiao the list of things they needed or lacked. After Lin Xiao reviewed it again, he picked out the urgent ones, and asked Lin Feng to bring people to collect them. Lin Feng was also very busy, and didn't have time to take care of his family. Usually, he would be gone for 10 days to half a month. Qiu Lily and Elmar were also sent out by Lin Xiao to take some level 1st kings to collect energy cores. The two of them each took a direction, and each of them brought 3 level 1 kings out. After Gao Haoyun joined, China's situation did not receive any help from the other bases. It was completely relying on China's own manpower and resources to support the endless zombie horde. The zombie corpses outside the wall were burned to ashes by the fire metahumans. But it did not stop the zombie horde from rushing up. At the beginning, China displayed its powerful military strength. The firepower and ammunition were very powerful. And before the zombie horde could reach the vacuum zone outside the wall, they would be eliminated by wave after wave of long-range attacks. However, this situation started to weaken after 10 days to half a month. When the zombie horde reached the vacuum zone, it was time for all kinds of machine guns and group abilities to be used. Lin Xiao was still leisurely building his base. The human base's wall was already 95% complete, and after this one was finished, he could continue building the wall of the other zombie base. With the addition of a new group of people, the construction progress was pushed even faster. The other bases were all paying attention to China's situation. Apart from Lin Xiao, the other leaders felt a sense of crisis as China's situation declined. Especially the Meng tribe that was closer to China. Some people had already started to flee the base. At this time, a certain level 2 king in Lin Xiao's space, after observing Lin Xiao for a long time, finally, he decided to say something that was bothering him. Chapter 765. Huh? You have a sister? Why did you only say it now? Lin Xiao sat on the sofa in the living room of the space, and looked at Lin Kuei in surprise. Lin Kuei, who was sitting on the sofa on the other side, just looked at her silently. Lin Xiao thought for a moment, and immediately understood. He said, "Oh, okay. You didn't believe me before? Or are you worried that if you know you have a sister, she will take her away and control you? Well, you are not familiar with me after all. It is normal to be cautious." Lin Kuei had indeed been cautious of her. Although he was grateful that this female zombie saved him from China, he could not completely trust her. He had a family member. It was a secret in his heart. He did not dare to say it, because he was afraid that others would hurt his family member because of him. That person was his sister, who was 3 years older than him. After observing for a while, Lin Kuei found that Lin Xiao was indeed a good female zombie. Although she was not very kind, she had a bottom line and principles. Especially this time, he saw that Lin Xiao had healed a large number of zombies' throats, including his. He had always been curious. This female zombie had a space attribute, and could swallow fire attribute. It was already very rare. How could she have such a powerful healing attribute? It did not matter if it was a human or a corpse, it could be healed. It was like cheating. Before being caught, my sister had been living alone in China. I could only sneak into China to visit her. Later on, when I accidentally came out, I was found by the people in China, so I was caught. Lin Kuei said with a hoarse voice. Then does your sister know about your situation? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. No, she thought I was dead the day I became a zombie. Lin Kuei slightly closed his eyes. His hoarse voice seemed to be more depressed. Lin Xiao looked at him now. He was actually very young. He was about 21 or 22 years old, but his temperament was much older. However, his temperament had aged a lot. Only his appearance had stopped at the time of his death. Did you become a zombie on the day of the apocalypse? The first batch? Lin Xiao looked at him and asked. Lin Kuei nodded. Then is your sister still in China? Lin Xiao's eyes suddenly flashed. He thought of the current situation in Wuxia. I don't know either. After I was captured, I lost contact with my sister. The biggest possibility is that she's still in the Wuxia base. Lin Kuei looked up at her, and a trace of confusion and panic flashed across his dark cat-like eyes. Fortunately, you said it now. Do you know the current situation in China? Lin Xiao sighed and looked at him. Mo Yan's situation is getting dangerous. Not long ago, he led the zombie wave to destroy the Black Dragon base in the northeast. Now he's besieging the base in China. Although the Wuxia base had once sent reinforcements to our major bases, no one was willing to help until the last moment. Lin Kuei was shocked when he heard the news. He widened his eyes and looked at Lin Xiao. What? Mo Yan brought the zombies to attack China's base? When did that happen? Why did he attack the Wuxia base? He also knew who Mo Yan was talking about. It was the zombie emperor from last time. Who would have thought that the zombie emperor would actually wipe out the entire Black Dragon base? And now it was attacking the #1 base in the country. He knew how powerful the zombie emperor was. At least when it came to summoning zombies, it could summon endless numbers. No matter how strong the defense of China was, and how many weapons they had, they would run out one day. When that time comes, the Wuxia base would be in danger. If the Wuxia base was in danger, his sister would be in danger too. He's just taking revenge. Most of the people in the Black Dragon base owe him. Gao Haoyun is also one of Mo Yan's enemies. Therefore, after he ran away to seek refuge in the Wuxia base, he lured Mo Yan over. Also, Mo Yan's situation doesn't seem right. I just don't know what a level 8 zombie emperor will do when it loses control. Lin Xiao's expression darkened. When a level 8 lightning zombie emperor loses control, the destructive power of the violent lightning strike would be unimaginable. Lin Xiao thought of it, and Lin Kuei of course thought of it too. He was at a loss. No, I need to find my sister now. Ms. Lu, please let me out. In his panic, Lin Kuei did not notice that his leopard ears and tail were exposed. His tail was wagging vigorously, and he seemed very uneasy. You won't be able to enter the Wuxia base like this. Lin Xiao looked at him and reminded him. Then she continued. Now that the Wuxia base is surrounded by countless zombies, it's not that easy to sneak in. Lin Kuei looked at Lin Xiao blankly, and his eyes flashed anxiously. Then what should we do? Don't worry. If you want to go in, I can directly represent the Wuxia base and take a helicopter. Lin Xiao comforted him. Of course, she didn't have a helicopter here. If she wanted to use it, she would have to borrow it from someone. As for who to borrow it from, well, that person was also in her base now, wasn't he? Although she really didn't want to have too much contact with that person, it was inevitable that there would be some interaction between leaders. Wu Qingyue shamelessly stayed in her base. Occasionally, Xiao Yunlong would come to catch him and take him back to Haiqing for a few days. Then Lin Xiao would feel relieved. But before she could recover, Wu Qingyue would come from Haiqing again. And now, almost the whole world knew that Wu Qingyue was pursuing her. Are you going too? Lin Kuei looked at her with some surprise. He thought that he could go alone. Yes. Lin Xiao nodded. During this period of time, Mo Yan's situation was getting more and more dangerous. After thinking about it, she decided to go and see Mo Yan's situation in person. If possible, she wanted to see which direction he would go. If it went in a bad direction, then for the future stability of the Wuxia base, Lin Xiao would still take action. She could ignore the life and death of the people in the Black Dragon base, Wuxia base, and other bases. But she couldn't let a factor that could threaten her base continue to grow. So after thinking for so many days, Lin Xiao changed her mind again. She decided to personally take a group of experts to Wuxia base to see the situation. Then when are we leaving? Lin Kuei looked at Lin Xiao with joy. With her going, things would naturally be much easier than if he went alone. Lin Xiao said, I'm going out to prepare now. You can stay here. It won't take long. After saying that, she stood up and disappeared in a flash. After coming out of the space, Lin Xiao immediately called Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen in, and asked them to call Yuan Tianxing and other senior managers for a meeting. Then she arranged the work after she left in an orderly manner. Yuan Tianxing, Chen Yuding, and the others had already been informed. So it wasn't surprising that Lin Xiao wanted to leave for Wuxia. Chapter 766. But at this moment, Lin Xiaolu and Tong Tong disappeared. When Lin Xiao went to pick up Duan Wan, he also brought back a group of children. These children often played with Lin Xiaolu and Tong Tong. But today, when they were playing on the school field, Tong Tong disappeared. At that time, a group of children panicked and looked everywhere. But then Lin Xiaolu also disappeared. So everyone immediately ran to report. At this time, Lin Feng and Lin Wenwen went out to collect supplies. Only Mrs. Lin and Cheng Wangxue looked after the children. Now that the children were missing, she immediately asked people to look for them. She also sent people to inform Lin Xiao. Lu Jun wasn't in the base. She was working in the cultivation base of Wushan. When she was catching insects in the field, she saw a level 1 king zombie running from the base. It was the little boy zombie. He flashed behind Lu Jun and said, "Leader wants you to go back. Tong is missing." The little boy's voice was hoarse, like stones rubbing against each other, very harsh. But after he finished speaking, he completely expressed his meaning. "What? See, say it again." Lu Jun stood up and looked at him, not understanding what he meant. Because Lin Xiao gave them numbers, the little boy was number 4. So now the zombies called him Asi. Before they remembered who they were, they all called him this. Leader said Tong Tong is missing. Asi looked up at her and said again. Lu Jun's expression darkened, and she flashed back to the base. Asi also flashed back, leaving the other zombies looking at each other. On the other side, when Lin Xiao arrived, everyone was already looking for Tong Tong and Lin Xiaolu in the school. Lin Xiao stood on the top of the school's tallest building, her eyes flashing fiercely. No one was faster than her at finding people. She raised her nose and sniffed, then flashed in a direction. Soon, Lin Xiao appeared in an abandoned old building a few kilometers away from the school. This small building was an old house, empty and full of dust and debris. Just then, someone from the school received news that a new space ability user had been seen in the vicinity of the children's playground today. He even secretly pointed at the group of children, with a few people, and discussed something. Later he disappeared, and so did Tong Tong. A new space arcanist? The level 3 one? Yuan Tianxing looked at the others. There were 2 spatial ability users in this base, the leader and Lin Wenwen. Not long ago, the second batch of survivors from the Netherworld King's base had a new rank 3 space ability user. Bring him here. Yuan Tianxing immediately ordered. Not long after Lu Tong returned to his room, he heard someone knocking on the door. Lu Tong, someone's looking for you. It was the voice of the person who lived next door. Lu Tong opened the door and asked in confusion. Someone's looking for me? Who are you? The person outside casually pointed at the door, and Lu Tong turned his head to look. Seeing that it was 2 soldiers wearing the uniform of the base, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Lu Tong didn't know what was going on. He closed the door and walked through the living room. When he reached the door, he asked the 2 men, "Can I help you?" "You're Lu Tong?" One of the 2 soldiers asked him. Lu Tong nodded. "Then please come with us. There's something we need your help with," the other soldier said in a pleasant tone. Lu Tong looked at their posture and knew that he had to go with them today. Seeing that the other party's attitude was not bad, his eyes flashed before he nodded and walked out. On the other side, after Lin Xiao arrived at the building, he went into stealth mode and followed the smell that was getting closer. Not long after, he heard voices. "Damn it, we've waited for so long for this day." Lu Tong bumped into those kids. "I hope this time he'll be killed." This girl's father is the deputy leader. If he finds out that his daughter was killed by Lu Tong, he'll definitely hate him to death. That's right, we've waited for more than 20 days. But do you think we'll be exposed? What if they find out that it was the boss who ordered us to do it and frame Lu Tong? Maybe we'll be discovered before we can escape. Pay, don't talk nonsense. Our plan is so thorough. They won't be able to find out so quickly. Even if Lu Tong refuses to admit it, the people in the base won't believe him. We'll kill him as soon as possible, then sneak out as if nothing happened. Then we'll go to Haiqing for a while and wait for the boss to gain a foothold here before coming back. These people still wanted to come back in the future. Although they couldn't kill people in the base in this post-apocalyptic world. If they really killed someone, it would be fine after a few years. As long as the matter wasn't exposed. Come back. Do you want to die? Anyway, I won't be coming back. Unless the boss's power is greater than Lin Feng's in the future, the matter will be exposed one day. We'll all die. TCH. At most we'll just wait a few more years. What's there to be afraid of? The matter won't be exposed. The Lin family won't know that we did it. Besides, Lu Tong has already become a scapegoat. They definitely won't find out about us. While Lin Xiao was listening to their plan, Lu Tong was brought in front of Yuan Tianxing and the rest for questioning. You're called Lu Tong, right? I heard that you appeared nearby today. May I ask what you're doing here? The one who came out to ask questions was Du Yuanxing. He stared at Lu Tong's eyes and asked. Nearby? I'm just passing by. Is there a problem? Lu Tong looked at Du Yuanxing with a puzzled expression. Someone saw you discussing something with a few people nearby. May I ask what you were discussing with them here? Du Yuanxing asked again. What? Discussing something with a few people? No, I'm just passing by today. It's just me. Where did other people come from to discuss something? What's going on? You guys brought me here to ask some strange questions. But you didn't tell me what happened. How do you expect me to answer? Lu Tong looked at him with a puzzled expression. Tong Tong. Where's my Tong Tong? Did you find him? Did you find Tong Tong? At this time, a figure rushed over and asked anxiously when he saw someone. Everyone looked and knew that this was Tong Tong's mother. Because Lu Jun was wearing contact lenses, although the color of his eyes was a bit strange, no one thought that he was a zombie. So now Lu Jun boldly appeared in the crowd of humans. Lu Jun, Tong Tong hasn't been found. My Xiao Lu is also missing. See if you can smell where they are. At this time, another person suddenly appeared and pulled Lu Jun to the side. He lowered his voice and said to her. It was Cheng Wangxue. Cheng Wangshue's eyes were also filled with panic. But she forced herself to calm down and looked at Lu Jun expectantly, because she knew Lu Jun's identity. Chapter 767. Lu Jun immediately jumped onto a tall tree next to him and sniffed the air around him. Soon, she could smell the scent of her son and Lin Xiaolu. Worried that the two children would be in danger, Lu Jun immediately rushed over there, without saying a word. On the other side, Lin Xiao heard voices and walked over to take a look. The location was indeed a bit secluded. It was not easy to be discovered. And it was so far away that there were very few people around. The two children were tied to a pillar with their hands and feet tied, and their mouths sealed. Tong Tong's eyes were red from fear, and tears were flowing nonstop. On the other hand, Lin Xiaolu was very calm. Her pair of big black eyes stared coldly at the men around her. Little girl, you're still quite calm. You're not bad, but it's a pity that you're too young. Big brother has no interest in children. At this time, a man walked in front of Lin Xiaolu with a smile, and stretched out his hand to touch her smooth and soft face. Lin Xiaolu turned her face away in disgust, avoiding his hand. Indeed, she'll definitely be a beauty when she grows up. What a pity. Looks like the beauty won't be able to grow up. Another man leaned against the wall not far away, and laughed with a face full of pity. At this time, a man ran over from afar, and said with a face full of joy, It's done, it's done. Lu Tong was brought over by Yuan Tianxing's men. This time, no matter how that kid tries to identify them, he won't be able to explain himself. Right. Boss's move is quite good. Daring to go against our boss, Lu Tong, and Li Honglin will definitely be out of luck. The man guarding the two children sneered. These people thought that Chun Hao wanted to deal with Lu Tong, because Lu Tong made a fool out of him, causing them and their boss to put out bait to lure the zombies. What they didn't know was that the reason Chun Hao wanted to kill Lu Tong was because he knew his secret. Lin Xiao leaned against the man who spoke, and learned from his thoughts that the boss was a man called Chun Hao. He was also a metahuman among the survivors of the old Hell King's base. Moreover, Lin Xiao had heard of this name before when she sent Xiedong to observe them. Lu Tong, Li Honglin, Chun Hao, and Wang Jian were all names that Xiedong had mentioned. However, this Chun Hao actually dared to target her family, and even wanted to kill the two children. This was simply courting death. Who gave you the guts to touch these two children? Suddenly, a cold voice rang out among the crowd. Who is it? Apart from the two children, everyone present was immediately startled. They stood up in an instant and entered a state of full alert. Almost all of them used their eyes to search their surroundings. A figure appeared beside the pillar where the two children were tied up. Lin Xiao looked at them coldly. Who are you? I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw him. After all, it was much easier for him to appear than to hide in the surroundings. Moreover, it was a woman. In front of these people, Lin Xiao calmly flicked his finger, and a small wisp of black smoke floated out and slid through the ropes on the two children's hands and feet. The rope immediately fell off, and the two children quickly stood up. Lin Xiaolu tore off the tape in her mouth and pulled Tong Tong to hide behind Lin Xiao. Ka ka ka. Several men around him instantly took out their guns and aimed them at Lin Xiao. In the post-apocalyptic world, there were no restrictions on firearms and knives, so it was normal for everyone to carry a gun and knife with them. Lin Xiao waved his hand, and immediately a few figures appeared beside him. All of them wore camouflage military uniforms and wore sunglasses. They stood on either side of Lin Xiao in 2 rows. Capture them. Let one of them escape. I want them alive. Lin Xiao directly ordered, then calmly held the 2 children and turned around to leave. The ones who were released were Jing Yan, Asong, Chen Zhong, Pesticide, and 2 other level 5 zombie leaders. Seeing the sudden appearance of a group of people wearing sunglasses, Chen Hao's people were shocked and immediately raised their guns to shoot. Bang bang bang. However, when their bullets were fired, the 6 zombies released by Lin Xiao just flashed and disappeared in place. Then Chen Hao's people only saw a blur in front of their eyes and were fiercely attacked from behind. The guns in their hands were immediately shot down. They didn't even have time to release their abilities before they were knocked unconscious by the back of their heads. Jing Yan led the zombies to carry these people one by one and followed Lin Xiao's direction and directly jumped down from the gap in the building. At this time, a figure suddenly flashed. Tong Tong. Lu Jun rushed in front of Lin Xiao in a panic. Mom. When Tong Tong saw his mother, he immediately pounced on her excitedly. Tong Tong is fine. He's just a little scared. It wasn't Lin Xiao who spoke, but Lin Xiaolu who was next to her. It's good that you're fine. Xiaolu, how about you? Did they do anything to you? Lu Jun held the child and examined him. After discovering that there was no problem, he was completely relieved. He then looked at Lin Xiaolu with concern and asked. Lin Xiaolu looked up at Lin Xiao and said with a smile, "They didn't have time to make a move." Lin Xiao pointed at her head and said, "Fortunately, they didn't make a move in advance. Otherwise you would be in danger. Why aren't you afraid?" Looking at the child's calm appearance, it seemed that she wasn't afraid of being hurt. Because I can feel their thoughts. I know they won't kill me and Tong Tong so quickly. They won't make a move so quickly, which means they have time. If they have time, you can come and save us. Lin Xiaolu smiled a little proudly. You're smart. Lin Xiao smiled and patted her head, then turned to look at Jing Yan and the others who were carrying an unconscious person, and said, "Okay, let's go back. It's not over yet." Then he waved his hand and released a car for Lu Jun and the 2 children to get in. He got in the driver's seat and started the car. Jing Yan and the other zombies outside the car were each carrying a criminal. Their bodies flashed and they jumped up to the roof, towards the school in the center of the base. What do you mean? I just passed by here to find someone to do something. I didn't do anything else. Don't wrongly accuse a good person. I didn't do anything. Lu Tong was taken to a classroom in the school. All the tables in the classroom were cleared out, leaving only one on the podium. Lu Tong sat on a chair 3 meters away from the podium, with 2 soldiers standing behind him. Du Yuanxing sat on the podium with his legs crossed and asked, Since you said you came to find someone to do something, then who do you think you're looking for? What is it? If you don't say it, who knows if it's a good thing or a bad thing? What bad thing can I do? I just want to find someone to help me move to another room. Can't I move to another room? Is that a bad thing? Lu Tong frowned and said with some grievance. Chapter 768. You want to change your residence? Why do you want to change? Do you think that ordinary people are not worthy of living with you metahumans? Du Yuanxing looked at him coldly. I just don't want to live with Chen Hao. Lu Tong curled his lips and said, Chen Hao? Oh, there's another rank 3 metahuman in your group. Didn't you guys come together? I thought you were worried about those ordinary people. After all, you guys don't get along with them. Du Yuanxing looked at him curiously and guessed. That's because Chen Hao and I have some personal conflicts. He wants me dead more than Wang Jian and the others. Lu Tong lowered his eyes slightly. A sharp glint flashed in them. All right, let's not talk about others first. Let's talk about you. However, someone said that after you came here, you were discussing something with the others. Not long after, they left, and then our deputy leader Lin's child and another very young child disappeared. We suspect that you were the one who took them away. Du Yuanxing directly expressed their suspicions. Lu Tong's expression froze for a moment. Then his eyes suddenly opened wide and said in shock, Why would I take away 2 children? I have no grudges with Deputy Leader Lin. Why would I take away their children? Furthermore, I came here alone today and did not come with anyone else. I didn't discuss anything with anyone. The people around him observed his expression and eyes. His expression was very natural. There did not seem to be any signs of falsehood. Is that so? Then it seems that someone is trying to frame you. Du Yuanxing looked at him with a cold expression, sitting there without moving, and continued. No matter, once we find the 2 children, the truth will come to light. Once we find them, the truth will come to light. Not long after, someone ran over to report to Du Yuanxing. The children have been found. Du Yuanxing immediately changed his calm demeanor and stood up from his chair. He asked nervously, How are the children? Are they all right? The soldier who came to report shook his head and said, The children are fine. The kidnappers have also been caught. Who? Lu Tong and Du Yuanxing both asked at the same time. Hearing Lu Tong's voice, Du Yuanxing turned to look at him. He saw that his face was filled with confusion and anger. From the moment he came here to be questioned, he knew that he had fallen into a trap. Although he guessed that it might be that person who did it, he would not say it for the time being without conclusive evidence. Now he heard that the child had been found and the kidnappers had been caught. He immediately wanted to know if this was really Chen Hao's doing. The soldier said, The kidnappers have been locked up, but the mastermind behind the scenes has not been caught. This matter has nothing to do with Lu Tong. As he spoke, he looked at Lu Tong, who had already stood up from his chair. It meant that he could let them go. However, Lu Tong didn't leave. He rushed over and asked, Is it Chen Hao? The soldier glanced at him, but did not say anything. Du Yuanxing said to Lu Tong, All right, since it has nothing to do with you, you can go back first. As he spoke, he looked at the 2 soldiers behind Lu Tong. The 2 soldiers received the look and immediately led Lu Tong out. Let's go. Seeing that the person had left, Du Yuanxing immediately revealed his true nature and asked with some excitement, Who found the child? So fast. Who's the mastermind? Yes, leader. Furthermore, the leader said that the mastermind behind all of this was that Chen Hao, a level 3 ability user. Leader has already sent Captain Duan to capture him. Lu Tong's guess is correct. Lu Hao wanted to take care of him, but he didn't dare to do it himself. That's why he turned his attention to Vice Leader Lin. The soldier only revealed the truth after Lu Tong left. As Du Yuanxing walked out, he asked, Where are the captured people being held? In the interrogation room. On the other side, Chen Hao was sitting in the living room of the dormitory, waiting for someone to bring him in for questioning. Seeing that Lu Tong was taken away by those people, Lu Tong would definitely suspect him, and then he would tell the people at the base his name. After that, the people at the base would also send someone to bring him in for questioning, and at that time, he could pretend that he knew nothing. The people at the base did not have any evidence, and could not do anything to him, just by listening to one side of the story. When the body of the child was found, Lin Feng might still be able to force himself to calm down, but Cheng Wangxue might not be able to do so. With Cheng Wangshue's violent temper, he would not be able to calm down unless he killed Lu Tong. In the end, after waiting for a long time, the people at the base did not return, but Lu Tong came back unscathed. Chen Hao's expression froze, but he quickly returned to normal. He smiled and said, "Yo, where did you go? I heard that you were taken away by the soldiers." Lu Tong did not expect to see the person he suspected just now when he returned home. After a moment of shock, his expression immediately turned cold. He did not say anything, but went straight back to his room and closed the door. Because there was no way to find someone to switch rooms with, Lu Tong could only take out some benefits and switch rooms with the people in the other 2 rooms. At least he would not be sleeping in the same room as Chen Hao. After entering the room and closing the door, he immediately leaned against the door and listened to the movements in the living room. This bastard actually dared to swagger here. Did he think that no one knew what he had done? Humph, you better sit down. From the looks of it, you still don't know that the matter with the child has been exposed, and that the child is fine. But you will be in trouble soon. Lu Tong thought with a cold smile. Lu Hao was surprised that Lu Tong could come back, and when he saw him go in, his face immediately darkened. He did not think that his men would make a mistake, but he felt that Lu Tong might have said something to get the people from the base to let him go. Could it be that because Lin Feng was not here, Yuan Tianxing did not care about this matter? Just as he was thinking about the reason, there was another knock on the door. Lu Hao turned his head to look in the direction of the door, but did not immediately get up to open it. Then, there was a second knock on the door. Only then did he stand up, walked to the door, and hesitated for a moment before opening it. There were 5 or 6 people standing outside the door, and standing at the very front was a woman. She looked ordinary, with long hair tied into a ponytail behind her head, and was about 1.7 meters tall. Behind her stood 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman, all wearing the same military uniform of the base. They also had guns in their hands. The woman looked at him expressionlessly, then said, "You must be Chen Hao, please come with us." Chen Hao looked at the woman blankly, then asked, "Who are you people?" Then he suddenly thought of something, and his eyes flashed as he took a step back and said, "Oh, I'm not Chen Hao. Chen Hao is not home, he went out. If you're looking for him, come back tomorrow." Saying so, he wanted to close the door, but the woman outside the door suddenly reached out and blocked the door. Without another word, Chen Hao turned around and instantly rushed toward the window of the living room. From the looks of it, he was ready to break out of the window and escape. At this time, Lu Tong also rushed out of the room, pointing at Chen Hao and shouting, "He's Chen Hao, don't let him get away." Chapter 769. Chen Hao wanted to rush towards the client, but someone reacted faster than him. The glass on the window was suddenly blocked by a wall. Bang dash, Chen Hao slammed into the wall, but didn't go out. Instead, he was pushed back by the wall's hardness, and almost fell to the ground. Before he could get up, he was wrapped into a ball by the mud wall that gushed out from the wall, leaving only his head sticking out. "Want to run? You have to see if I agree," Duan Wan said coldly, then turned to Ding Datong and said, "Take him away." "Wait a minute. I have a piece of information that you should be interested in." Lu Tong suddenly called out to Duan Wan with a cold expression. On the other side, Lin Xiao sent Lin Xiaolu to Cheng Wangxue and said, "All right, Xiaolu is fine. Don't worry." Like Lu Jun, she checked Lin Xiaolu's body up and down, and was completely relieved after seeing that she was fine. She said angrily, "Who is it?" Lin Xiao said, "Go to the interrogation room and you'll know." She didn't plan to go there, since the child was saved, then the rest would be handled by the people below. She had other things to do, and would be leaving in 2 days. On the other side, Lu Tong was brought to the interrogation room, and Duan Wan threw him to Du Yuanxing for questioning. "Didn't I let you go? Why are you here again?" Du Yuanxing looked at her in surprise. He has a piece of information, you can ask him. Duanwan threw him down then left. Du Yuanxing looked at Duanwan's back, then turned back to look at Lu Tong strangely and said, "Sit down and talk." The interrogation room wasn't big, and it was reconstructed from a laboratory. There was a table in the middle of the room, and a chair was fixed 2 meters in front of the table. Usually, the person being interrogated would sit on this chair. Du Yuanxing and one of his subordinates pulled out the chair under the table and sat down, letting Lu Tong sit on the chair in front. Lu Tong sat down and said, "Deputy Leader Lin's lover, Madame Lin, was kidnapped in the year of the apocalypse. That kidnapper was actually Chen Hao. Madame Lin didn't seem to recognize him at the time, and he escaped. This was Chen Hao's secret, but I accidentally found out. That's why he's been trying to kill me in secret to silence me." Du Yuanxing looked at him with slight surprise. "Is what you said true?" Lu Tong nodded and said, "At that time, he seemed to want to force himself on Madame, but something unexpected happened, so he didn't succeed." Of course, Du Yuanxing knew what he meant when he said force. Cheng Wangxue was pretty to begin with, and it was normal for the kidnappers to be lustful when she was kidnapped. Hearing this, Du Yuanxing asked him with a sullen face, "Do you have any evidence?" Lu Tong shook his head and said, "He said it himself. I didn't record it, so I don't have any evidence. But you can also find evidence, and you can also confront Madame Lin. Anyway, I have said what I should say." Du Yuanxing looked at him in silence for a few seconds. He took the statement written by his subordinate and looked at it. Then he stood up and walked out. On the other side, the 6 kidnappers brought back by Lin Xiao were being interrogated one by one. But they stubbornly refused to say anything. It was the same for Chen Hao. After being captured, he had remained silent. He didn't say anything when asked. The 6 people he sent to do this were all his loyal subordinates. They definitely wouldn't expose him. Even if these people told him that they were the ones who exposed him, he wouldn't believe them. These people couldn't produce any evidence, and without evidence, they wouldn't dare to touch him. "He won't say anything?" Duanwan looked at Chen Hao in front of the glass outside the interrogation room. Li Hongsheng, who was beside her, shook his head and said, "He hasn't said anything." "Why does the leader think it's him?" "The leader must know something," Duanwan said. At this time, Cheng Wangxue also came over. She stared coldly at Chen Hao and said in a gloomy voice, "Is he the mastermind?" Duanwan looked at her and said, "The leader said it's him. But we haven't gotten anything out of him. He also won't admit it, and the people brought back by the leader aren't saying anything either. We have no evidence to confirm whether it's him or not. I believe the leader." Cheng Wangxue took a step forward and stared at Chen Hao. Then she asked with some confusion, "But why did he kidnap Xiao Lu and Tong Tong?" "It's not as simple as kidnapping. They plan to kill the hostages. The goal is actually to kill someone else," Duanwan said. "What do you mean? Why drag my child into the water to kill someone else?" Cheng Wangxue turned around and asked angrily. "It's like this. This Chen Hao probably wanted to borrow someone else's hand to kill a spatial ability user called Lu Tong. He wanted to push the death of Xiao Lu and her children onto Lu Tong and frame him. As for why he would make a move on Xiao Lu, it might be because children are easy targets, and also because of Lin Feng's current status and identity." Duanwan said the first part of what she said was the truth, but the second part was speculation. How dare he? How dare he come up with such a sinister plot and drag 2 innocent children into it? Scum! When Cheng Wangxue thought of her child and 4-year-old Tong Tong, almost dying because of this man's plot, she immediately gritted her teeth and wanted to rush in and kill this man. She believed that Lin Xiao wouldn't be wrong. If he said it was this person, then it must be this person. At this time, Du Yuanxing walked in with some people. Come, the information on Lu Tong is here. Big Sis Cheng, you're here, this matter is related to you." The moment he walked in, he handed over the information in his hand, and immediately said when he saw Cheng Wangxue, "Related to me?" Cheng Wangxue looked at him blankly. Du Yuanxing directly handed over the records in his hand to her and asked, "Do you remember that you were kidnapped in the year of the apocalypse?" "It was once, how did you know?" Cheng Wangxue took the records and was stunned for 2 seconds when she heard what he said. Then her eyes darkened as she looked at him and asked. Du Yuanqing pointed at the records in her hand and said, "That person is called Lu Tong. You can read it yourself. Moreover, this Chen Hao probably wanted to kill Lu Tong because of this matter. Because once you enter this base, your entire family will be here. What if Lu Tong reveals this matter to others one day? If Lu Tong reveals this matter one day, he will be out of luck." Cheng Wangxue looked at him suspiciously, then lowered her eyes to look at the records in her hand. As she looked, her expression changed. Anger, vengeance. Her hands trembled slightly, and her expression was twisted. Cheng Wangxue closed her eyes tightly and clenched her fists, forcing herself to calm down. Although Lu Tong said that, "We currently have no evidence to prove that what he said is true," Du Yuanqing suddenly said. In other words, there was no evidence to prove that this Chen Hao is the kidnapper who wanted to violate her 5 years ago. "Let me in." Cheng Wangxue suddenly opened her eyes. Her doll-like face was as cold as an iceberg. Chapter 770. Chen Hao, who had been silent all this time, sat quietly in the interrogation room. The interrogator also sat quietly with him. Suddenly the door opened. Chen Hao and the interrogator turned to see Cheng Wangxue walk in with a frosty expression. "Captain Cheng." The interrogator stood up and nodded to Cheng Wangxue in greeting. Although Cheng Wangxue was a strength-type ability user, she was still a 5th-level ability user. There were many things to do in the base, so she and Du Yuanqing were in charge of the base's daily necessities. She was mainly in charge of the catering. The potatoes, pumpkins, and sweet potatoes that Lu Jun brought back from Wushan were all given to her to handle. Cheng Wangxue walked in front of Chen Hao and looked at him coldly. "Do you know me?" Chen Hao's eyes flashed when he saw her come in, but then he pretended to be confused and asked, "Who are you?" Cheng Wangxue didn't care about his answer and took a step back. Then she turned to the interrogator and said, "Take off his shirt and show me his left shoulder." "What is Captain Cheng doing?" Duan Wan and the others watched the situation from outside and asked curiously. The interrogator was a young man in his 20s. When he heard Cheng Wangshue's request, he nodded and immediately went to pull off Chen Hao's clothes. Chen Hao's expression changed when she said she was going to take off his clothes. He resisted agitatedly. "What are you doing? Why are you going to take off my clothes? Are you going to use torture to extort a confession? Don't move. Sit still." The interrogator saw that Chen Hao had been sitting obediently a moment ago, but now he had such a big reaction when he heard she was going to take off his clothes. He shouted. Chen Hao was fixed to the chair, and the chair was fixed to the ground. Although his ability was at the 3rd level, it was an Earth-type ability that didn't have much attack power. Seeing that the young interrogator was going to forcefully pull off his clothes, Chen Hao immediately moved his fingers and used his ability. Bang! Cheng Wangxue jumped up and kicked the earth cone that had just emerged from the wall. She stared at him coldly and said, "What are you afraid of if you don't know me? Do you have some secret behind your back?" Seeing that a fight was about to break out, the people outside immediately rushed in. "Get out of my way." Du Yuanqing walked directly behind Chen Hao and poked him in the back with his finger. Zzzz. A burst of electricity ran through Chen Hao's body. "Ah!" Chen Hao let out a cry as his entire body went limp. Then he fell forward. At this moment, the interrogator immediately tore open his clothes, and sure enough, there were a few faint marks on his left shoulder. Cheng Wangxue walked over to take a look, and his entire body shook. His eyes immediately flashed with intense hatred and killing intent. It was this person who had harmed her in the past, and now he had come to harm her daughter. It's him. He's the kidnapper from a few years ago. Cheng Wangxue took a few deep breaths before clenching her teeth and suppressing the fluctuating emotions in her heart. The others were slightly startled, and then they were overjoyed. On the other side, after Lin Xiao finished arranging things, he took Duan Wan's group and Xin Yuzhen, Lin Kuei, Lu Tianyi, Jing Yan and the other zombies out of the base and headed towards Haiqing. In Haiqing, Wu Chengyue sat in his study and asked Xiao Liqing with a strange expression. Didn't she always stay out of it? Why did he suddenly want to go there by himself? What does she want to do? Watch the show. As for the leader of the base, Miss Lu originally planned to ignore her, but now she suddenly changed her mind and wanted to go there at this critical moment. It can't be that she's going to watch the show from afar, right? Xiao Liqing shook his head. I don't know what Leader Lu is thinking. Maybe it's because Mo Yan's situation is getting worse. At least I don't think she's going for China. Wu Qingyue thought about it and nodded. I think so too. I don't know what's going on with Mo Yan right now. No one can get too close to him. So there's very little information about him. But looking at China's current situation, I'm afraid it'll start to collapse in another month. The energy of a human is limited, not to mention the energy of a psychic. Using it continuously like this, the recovery is very slow, and the number of zombies doesn't decrease at all. So this isn't a long-term solution. Wu Qingyue sighed and said, since she wants to go, then I'll go and have a look as well. When Xiao Liqing heard this, he looked at him strangely and couldn't help but say, Boss, you can't keep pestering her like this. She'll hate you more and more. It'll have the opposite effect, you know? From the Spring Festival until now, his leader has been running to the base whenever he has something to do. That way, the people from both bases basically knew that he was chasing the female leader of the new base. This made most of the people in Haiqing very curious about the female leader. In the end, running to the base was useless. The female leader would avoid him as soon as she saw him. She would only appear when she had work to do. So this person often ran to her office to sit. He couldn't even chase her away. In the end, he even moved the leader's work in Haiqing to her office to handle. Xiao Liqing knew that Wu Qingyue had some strange hidden characteristics, but he used to hide it very well. Ever since he met the female zombie leader, he gradually revealed it. Then if I don't take the initiative to find her, am I supposed to wait for her to find me? I'm the one chasing her, not the other way around. Since ancient times, women have been afraid of pestering men. As long as I persevere, she will accept me one day. Wu Qingyue was at his wit's end when he thought of this. There was no other way. That female zombie's defense was too tight. He had worked hard for so long, but he still didn't have any chance. In the past, it was still useful to push Ling Ling out, but now she was immune to Ling Ling. As for her belly, it had already been 5 or 6 months, but it was still flat and unnoticeable. After being in contact for such a long time, he could also see the current Lu Tianyu's personality, neither soft nor hard. Although he really wanted to force her to marry him directly, using the child as a reason was enough. After all, this was also his child, and he had this right and responsibility. It didn't matter if her identity was a zombie, or if the child would be a zombie, a human, or some monster in the future. He wouldn't despise it at all. But he was afraid that if he was too tough, the other party would be tougher than him. After all, she was also someone who could become a leader, and not an ordinary woman. There wouldn't be a good result if he went head-on. A melon that was forcefully twisted wasn't sweet, so couldn't he wait for the melon to ripen and sweet before twisting it? Of course, this nourishment was still added by him, and he had to keep a close eye on this melon. Otherwise, if it was accidentally picked by someone else, wouldn't he cry? Thinking about the child calling someone else daddy in the future, Wu Qingyue's heart turned cold. Besides, I didn't force her. I think I've already done quite well on this point, Wu Qingyue said with a confident smile. Chapter 771. When Lin Xiao arrived at Haiqing with her self-defense forces, Wu Qingyue had already prepared a helicopter for her. I remember I only borrowed one. Why did you prepare so many? Xiao Lin looked at the 3-armed transport helicopter strangely. Then, a thought flashed in her mind. And she turned to look at Wu Qingyue and sneered. No way, you're going too? Didn't you say you weren't going? You said you weren't obligated to save all of humanity. Wu Qingyue choked. Then he smiled at Lin Xiao and said, that was before. The situation is different now. Because you want to go. Lin Xiao rolled her eyes at him and said, you're really annoying like this. If you want to go, then go. But can you not let me know? When I see you showing off like that, I feel very uncomfortable. This man really didn't know what it meant to give up. After being pestered by him for so long, Lin Xiao's patience was running out. If it wasn't for the fact that the two bases were cooperating, she really would have beaten him up. Why? If I don't let you know, how will you know how I feel about you? Wu Qinghua said to her with a smile. The group of people behind him were already used to this. After all, the leader of Haiqing had been chasing after the leader of Universal Life Base for almost 2 months, but there was no effect at all. It was already the end of March, and the temperature was gradually rising. She could wear one less piece of clothing. So what if I know? I won't accept you. You're not tired, but I am. Besides, I borrowed the helicopter from you. I didn't take advantage of you. Lin Xiao said coldly, and walked directly to one of the helicopters. Duan Wan brought Ding Datong, Li Hongsheng, and the others, as well as Xin Yuzhen who was beside Lin Xiao over. Universal Life Base didn't have a pilot, so when Wu Qinghua prepared the helicopter for them, he also provided a pilot. Behind Wu Qinghua were still Xiao Liqing, Mo Li and Huang Ming. Looking at the backs of Lin Xiao and the others walking towards the helicopter, Xiao Liqing said with a hint of schadenfreude, "See, I told you that this won't work. It will only backfire." Wu Qinghua turned around and looked at him with a smile. "Then do you have a better idea?" Although Wu Qinghua was a little displeased to be ridiculed by his subordinate, he was slightly surprised by Lin Xiao's words. He didn't expect that everything he did was just showing off in her eyes. Wu Qinghua's mood became slightly downcast. In my opinion, with her strong personality, she definitely doesn't like being restricted. In her eyes, everything that the leader did seemed to be showing off on the surface. But deep down, she felt that she would be affected or restricted by the leader. That's why I'm getting more and more disgusted with your methods. Fortunately, leader, you didn't use forceful methods to chase after her. That's smart of you. At this moment, Emily suddenly said with a straight face. They watched as their leader chased after him for so long without any results. Instead, their relationship became more and more strange. She continued, "If it weren't for the fact that our base is cooperating with her subordinate's base, I think you would have been beaten up by her a long time ago." "Beat me? Why?" Wu Qinghua looked at her in confusion. He didn't do anything to hurt her or disturb her. Emily glanced at him indifferently. Even if it was her own leader, she still had an indifferent expression on her face. "Because the way you're pestering me is like a fly. If it were me, I would also hit him until he stopped pestering me. In my opinion, Miss Lu's patience is too good." Wu Qinghua, who was compared to a fly by his subordinate. Xiao Liqing, who was watching his boss being compared to a fly by his colleagues. "Big sister Mo, aren't you afraid of making the leader angry? How dare you say that?" Wu Qinghua looked at Lin Xiao's back in silence for a long time. In the end, he suddenly sighed, feeling very down. Is this really not okay? Or are the two of them really not fated to be together? On the other side, Duan Wan, who was preparing to board the plane behind Lin Xiao, said, "This leader Wu is really reluctant to let go. He knows your identity, but he doesn't care about this. I don't know how long he can last like this." She could see that although leader Wu was always smiling, his smile usually didn't reach those crescent moon eyes. Only when he saw her boss would there be stars in his eyes. It just wasn't obvious. Even if it wasn't a very strong feeling, it couldn't be said that there were no feelings in it. There was still some sincerity in it. But Duan Wan also knew that leader Wu's method definitely wouldn't be able to get her. Their boss wasn't a slow person when it came to feelings. She also knew how she felt about Deputy Captain Yuan. Because she didn't want to ruin the relationship between the two of them, she had always pretended not to notice. But this Wu Qinghua, their boss had obviously rejected him countless times. But he didn't take it to heart every time. Although he didn't seem tired, she didn't know how long he could last. "Don't mention him. Just thinking about him makes me sick. I don't know if there's something wrong with his brain. He actually came to propose. What the hell is that? Do you really think he likes me? I think it's just for Lingling's treatment. If he told me directly, I would definitely help him cure Lingling unconditionally, and it would be fine for many years. But there's no need to use this method. Do you think I don't understand anything?" Lin Xiao heard Duanwan mention this matter and felt a headache. Even if Wu Qingyue's ability level was high and his mental strength was too strong, she couldn't sense his thoughts. But she could stand in his perspective and consider the pros and cons of this matter. He cared about Lingling so much. Of course, he had long discovered that as long as Lingling was by his side, her emotions would be stable and her personality would be more cheerful. If she stayed by his side in the future, maybe one day the child's condition would be completely cured. Lin Xiao had no intention of harming Lingling. Although she didn't like children and couldn't do anything about them, she had already accepted Lingling in her heart. But since she had accepted Lingling in her heart, she also somewhat liked her. Wu Qingyue directly explained to her that for the sake of the child's condition, she could visit Lingling often, and she could also leave Lingling in the base. But what the hell was this proposal? What the hell was he talking about giving little man in her stomach a healthy family? Why did he want her to be responsible for forcing him? That wasn't what she did. He also said that he had to be responsible for little man's future growth. He wanted her to marry him for these reasons. Her future life would be controlled by him? Disturbed by him? Half of her space would be occupied by him? Forget it. Just thinking about it made her feel tired. Then what if he keeps pestering you like this? Maybe one day you'll be so annoyed that you'll go crazy and suddenly agree? Duanwan looked at her amused. Lin Xiao looked at her silently and didn't say anything. No matter how crazy she was, she wouldn't marry someone so easily. Chapter 772. Shen Yuzhen, who was sitting next to him, silently lit a candle for Wu Qingyue. Leader, your road to chasing your wife is very long. Lin Xiao turned her head and watched the plane slowly take off. The sound of the propeller and engine was too loud, and they all quieted down. She didn't know what Wu Qingyue was thinking, but what he did was definitely related to Lingling. Thinking about it, Lingling was also the key. After all, if it wasn't for her, she wouldn't have developed such a complicated relationship with Wu Qingyue. Although she was really tired of what Wu Qingyue was doing now, but she wouldn't really hate him from the bottom of her heart. Because other than bringing a lot of supplies as a gift that day, after she rejected it, he didn't forcefully send anything over. Perhaps the other party knew that she disliked this kind of approach, so in the end, he often appeared by her side and didn't leave. Lin Xiao thought that it would be great if she was reborn into someone else's body. Why did she have to be reborn into this Lu Tianyu who was courting death? After the plane took off, it flew north. A few hours later, they soon arrived at the city where the Wuxia base was located. But looking down from the plane, there were zombies everywhere. Every highway, street, alley, and the open space between the buildings were filled with zombies. The number of zombies in front of them was no longer the number of people in a second-class city. This was obviously a group of zombies that were attracted from the surrounding cities. The closer they got to the Wuxia base, the denser the group of zombies became. Rumble bang rumble. In the distance ahead, they could see a location in the sky that was dark. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the low-pressure dark clouds, and there were constantly flashing purple lightning striking down. Although the shape of the falling lightning didn't look big, there were a lot of them, and they were very dense. Both Lin Xiao and Shen Yuzhen could feel a repressed and violent aura from that minefield. Lin Xiao was not unfamiliar with this aura. Go around that minefield and approach from the other side. Lin Xiao ordered. The helicopter that Lin Xiao and the others took bypassed the minefield, and Wu Qingyue and the others behind them also followed. There are 3 helicopters approaching from the west, their identities unknown. Leader, are the people from other bases coming over? Ho Guozhong, the deputy leader of Wuxia, walked to Xikong Chen's side and reported the helicopters to him. Let them in and see which base they are from. Xikong Chen stood in front of the big screen in the command room, with his hands clasped behind his back. He raised his head slightly to look at the image on the screen. On the screen was the outer wall of the base. Countless zombies were piled up like a mountain and climbing up the wall. Many of them fell down halfway, but they quickly got up and continued to climb up. They were like frenzied beasts that didn't know fatigue, didn't know giving up, and wouldn't stop until they achieved their goal. From time to time, Sparks would explode and countless abilities would be used to attack the zombies. There were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and all kinds of abilities. These were all controlling long-range attacks, as well as the ability users on the top of the wall who were fighting in close combat, or those who were fighting with the zombies climbing up with swords and guns. The battle was very intense, and the zombies that could climb up were quickly eliminated. However, all of them were covered in blood and looked battered and exhausted. Everyone looked tired and dispirited. They had been fighting nonstop for a month without any time to rest. He had been nervously blocking the zombies outside from invading. However, there were too many zombies and they were endless. They had been attacking for a month without any signs of retreating. Everyone was already very tired, but they still persisted in fighting. Beside the big screen, there were several small screens that showed the outside scene from different angles. There was a half-sized screen that showed a minefield. There were also countless zombies in this minefield. The lightning that fell from the sky was random, and it hit whatever it saw. It seemed like there was no target, and there was no selectivity. Sikong Chun let the rank 7 water element ability Han Xiao go out to find out what was going on in the minefield. However, Han Xiao had been out for more than half a month, and there was still no information about the lightning. Moreover, this minefield, it could run. From time to time, it would appear on the east side for different periods of time, and from time to time, it would appear on the west side. It was like a living thing. After hearing Ho Guozhong's words, Sikong Chun didn't show any expression on his face. He just calmly let people in. However, Gao Haoyan, who was at the side, had a happy expression and asked nervously, "Are they reinforcements?" Ho Guozhong shook his head. "Of course they are humans who can drive a helicopter here, but whether they are here to rescue us is still unclear. Maybe they are here to hit us when we are down." At this time, Hong Yijie suddenly pointed at the screen that showed the scene of the minefield and said, "Look, the minefield has disappeared." Just now, there was still lightning and thunder, and the ground was covered in smoke. Now there was no trace of the lightning, and the dark clouds in the sky were quickly dissipating. Not long after, the helicopter flew high into the airspace of China's base. Then, under the instructions of China's ground, it landed on an open space. "So it's Leader Wu. I didn't expect you to come." Ho Guozhong stood at the edge of the open space, and after watching the helicopter land, he happily went forward to welcome him. He saw Wu Qingyue smiling, and another young beauty walked over side by side. Ho Guozhong's eyes flashed, and he secretly looked at the woman who had a calm smile on her face. She was 1.7 meters tall, and her figure was not bad. Her chest was plump, her waist was thin, and her legs were straight. Her steps were steady, and her aura was not weak. She was wearing a black military uniform and a military cloak, although the style was slightly different from Wu Qingyue's. But this kind of attire was the default dress of a leader after the apocalypse. Generally, people who were not leaders would not dress like this. This woman could walk side by side with Wu Qingyue, and she was wearing a leader's uniform. It seemed that she was also a leader-level figure. It was just that there seemed to be no female leaders in these major bases, and the only one was the female leader of the newly built Hangzhou base. Moreover, she came with Wu Qingyue, so it must be true, because Wu Qingyue was chasing the female leader of the new base. Chapter 773. Although Lin Xiao responded with a smile, she did not return the other's hand. She was actually telling the other party that their statuses were not the same. Even if Ho Guozhong was a rank 7 metahuman, he was still a weakling in her eyes, not to mention that this person was only a vice leader. It was polite for her to respond, but if she were to extend her hand to return the handshake, it would be lowering her status. "Let's go and see your leader. Tell me about your situation." Wu Qingyue smiled and nodded at Ho Guozhong, but his feet did not stop moving forward. Ho Guozhong automatically moved aside and took a step back to follow beside the two of them. "The situation is not good. Our soldiers and metahumans have not rested for a month. The death toll is not high, but the number of injured is not small. The zombie tide has been attacking continuously. We do not know when they will retreat." Ho Guozhong said with a serious expression. You should know the reason for the appearance of the zombie tide, right? Did you not think of any other way to solve the problem? Wu Qingyue asked curiously. Everyone knew that the reason was within the zombies. For the zombie tide to be able to last for so long, it must have been ordered or controlled. If he didn't find out who was the one controlling the corpse tide wouldn't retreat. Our leader felt that the zombie tide is related to the moving thunderclouds, but the people we sent to investigate were unable to find any information about the minefield. Moreover, the people we sent out are all dead. Even one of our directors with a rank 7 ability has not returned yet, Ho Guozhong said with a sigh. Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue looked at each other. It seems like it has been a long time. China still has not found out that the zombie tide was caused by Mo Yan? How do you know that the zombie tide is related to the thunderclouds? Wu Qingyue asked curiously while walking. Ho Guozhong replied while leading the way. Because when the thunderclouds appear, the zombie tide will change. The zombies will become crazy and attack fiercely. If the thunderclouds disappear, they will slow down a little, but they will not retreat. Just like now, the thunderclouds have just disappeared. The zombie tide should slow down a little. As he spoke, he entered the command building and walked for a while before arriving at the command room. Of course, only Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue could enter. The other two could only bring one subordinate with them. As soon as they entered the command room, everyone standing in front of the big screen turned around to look at them. You're only here now. Leader Wu, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Sikong Chen, who had been expressionless all this while, casually said when he saw Wu Qingyue. The expression on his face didn't change, and his eyes were so deep that no one could tell what he was thinking. But when he saw Lin Xiao beside Wu Qingyue, his eyes flickered. When the others saw Lin Xiao, they were all stunned. Gao Haoyun, who was standing next to Sikong Chen, looked at Lin Xiao with great interest. With an ambiguous smile he said, Yo, is this Leader Wu's girlfriend? As soon as he said that, the others looked at Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue with dubious gazes. Lin Xiao smiled calmly, but when he looked at Gao Haoyun, a fierce look flashed across his eyes. There was no sound. Wu Qingyue slightly frowned and said with a faint smile, Although I really wanted to introduce her to everyone, she didn't agree to it. But I think everyone already knows who she is, so I won't introduce her. When Gao Haoyun heard this, his eyes lit up. With a bright smile he looked at Lin Xiao and said, Oh, is that so? If that's the case, then everyone has a chance. Although you may know my name, let me introduce myself. My name is Gao Haoyun, level 8 Arcanist Ice Element. Originally, when he heard about this woman in the Black Dragon base, he didn't pay much attention. But now that he saw her, his thoughts changed. He didn't expect the female leader of this new base to be so young. She looked to be around 22 or 23 years old. She had a beautiful oval face, a pair of bright green eyes, a sharp nose and pale but moist lips. Her straight black hair was straight to her waist, and 2 strands were scattered on both sides of her slender neck, casually hanging in front of her towering chest. Under the black military cloak was a slender waist, and a pair of slender, straight and smooth legs. Her calm temperament made her look cold and elegant, making people unable to move their eyes away. A beautiful face, a perfect body and a cold temperament. Such a beautiful woman. Any man who saw her would want to tear off her solemn and proper military uniform and fiercely press her down to admire her beautiful face as she held back her tears. Especially in this post-apocalyptic world where women were lacking. Who wouldn't want such a beautiful woman who stood at the same height as them? Everyone present was a leader-level character. Even if they had any bad thoughts after seeing a beautiful woman, they wouldn't show it on their faces. It was just that each and every one of their hidden gazes allowed Lin Xiao to sense their mentality. Other than Wu Qingyue and Sikong Chen, who Lin Xiao couldn't see through, Gao Haoyun's gaze was too obvious. The highest level of the others was only 7th level, so Lin Xiao only needed to look at them to know what they were thinking. A group of perverts. That's right. The original owner's body was indeed more fiery than Lin Xiao's. Moreover, her appearance was slightly more beautiful, and more importantly, she was younger. She knew that her current body's appearance would attract a lot of covetous eyes, otherwise, the original owner wouldn't have been able to survive until now. She could even use the tiger's might to cause trouble in Sea City base. That was why she was so low-key when she wasn't strong. But that didn't mean that now that she was out, she would become the target of these men. Lin Xiao smiled faintly, looking at Gao Haoyun without saying anything. Someone next to her spoke. I didn't expect Leader Lu to be so young. We thought that a leader would at least be an old woman in her 30s like Nether Flame. One of China's directors, Hu Zhiyong, stared at her and said with a rippling smile. Lin Xiao, who was called an old woman at the age of 32, was speechless. Sigh. Although she's already in her 30s, her body is still maintained quite well. It's a pity that she was forced to death by Earth Dragon Base and Hidden Cloud City. In any case, she's still a beauty, Lu Jinan said with a face of pity. Wu Qingyue's expression became more and more indifferent as he listened. His crescent moon-like eyes gradually opened. There was a faint flash of cold light in them. These people unscrupulously stared at the female zombie with such an evil gaze, and even compared her to a dead person. This made Wu Qingyue's heart rise with a hint of anger. Chapter 774. Looks like you guys aren't worried about the zombies outside breaking through your defense line. You still have the mood to admire the beauty. Wu Qingyue stepped forward and blocked half of Lin Xiao's body behind him. He said to Lu Jinan and the others with a smile. It was obvious that he was mocking them for having such unscrupulous thoughts at this time. Although Wu Qingyue's face was smiling, his actions showed his strong desire to possess Lin Xiao. These people stared at Lin Xiao with greedy eyes, making him want to dig out their eyes. The anger in his heart was burning, but he did not show it on his face. Yes, Leader Wu is reluctant to let her go, but she did not agree with you. Everyone here has the right to chase after the beauty, right? Gao Haoyun stared at Lin Xiao's face and smiled. It seems like the Ice Demon leader does not care about the destruction of his base. Wu Qingyue smiled and looked at Gao Haoyun. Ice Demon was Gao Haoyun's title, just like Lin Xiao's Hellfire. It was because he was an ice elemental, a rank 8 ice elemental. If he really did not want to let go of the Black Dragon base, it would not have been destroyed by the zombie tide so quickly. Gao Haoyun's expression froze, but he quickly returned to normal. He pretended to be sad. How can I not care? That is the base that I built with my own hands, and now it has been swallowed by the zombie tide. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost. I am also sad. But I heard that the Black Dragon base has a lot of troubles, and Du Kuanxing has been the one to solve them. Moreover, he has not given up on your base, and is still trying to survive in the underground base. At this time, Lin Xiao suddenly stepped to the side and walked out from behind Wu Qingyue. She said to Gao Haoyun with a smile. Her smile was different from Wu Qingyue's. Wu Qingyue's smile was moist and elegant, like a warm spring breeze. On the other hand, Lin Xiao's smile was cold and indifferent. It was not exactly a sneer, but it was a smile with a bit of arrogance. There was a hint of cheerfulness, and it made people feel comfortable, but it was impossible to ignore her pressure. Lin Xiao's expression was calm, and her smile was elegant. However, her words were like a knife stabbing into Gao Haoyun's heart, and a slap to his face. That's right, Du Kuanxing was the one who truly cared about the Black Dragon base. Although Du Kuanxing's character was somewhat sinister and cunning, his starting point was for the sake of his base. He had put in a lot of effort for the Black Dragon base, which was why the survivors of the Black Dragon base had a stable shelter. However, in the eyes of outsiders, they only saw the powerful Gao Haoyun. In this post-apocalyptic world, strength was everything. People respected the strong, and the strongest person would naturally become the leader. However, not every leader would do their best for the survivors of the base. As for Gao Haoyun, he didn't care much about the situation of the survivors in the Black Dragon base. He only cared about his private army and subordinates. However, he didn't want outsiders to know about this. In any case, people thought that he was strong, and he was the leader of the Black Dragon base. He had the ability to stand with these leaders. However, after hearing what Lin Xiao said, he felt that his disguise had been exposed, and he felt slightly inferior in front of these people. Du Kuanqing is only doing what he should do. Is there a problem? Gao Haoyun's eyes flashed with a fierce light, but he quickly concealed it. He looked at Lin Xiao with a faint smile, and his eyes couldn't help but sweep up and down her delicate body. That's right. Among the leaders here, the Ice Demon leader is the most relaxed. Unlike us, although we are leaders, we have to be responsible for every survivor in the base. It's really worrisome. Lin Xiao smiled as she looked at Gao Haoyun. Everyone could see that she was only a rank 7 metahuman, but she was fearless against the rank 8 metahuman, Gao Haoyun. Her aura wasn't any weaker than the people here. Moreover, there was a faint feeling that Gao Haoyun was going to be weaker, but they didn't know if it was an illusion. At this time, Wu Qinghua took another step forward and silently shielded half of Lin Xiao's body behind him. He smiled and said, I just asked Vice Leader Ho from Wuxia. You guys seem to have not figured out the cause of the zombie tide? I thought Leader Gao was already here, so you guys should at least know the reason for the zombie tide. Wu Qinghua's words successfully made Gao Haoyun's expression stiffen again. What do you mean? Xikong Chun, who had been expressionless, narrowed his eyes. He glanced at Gao Haoyun, before looking at Wu Qinghua with doubt. I think Leader Xikong doesn't need to ask. You should know in your heart. Stand to the side. Can you stop blocking in front of me? Lin Xiao sneered at Xikong Chun as she raised her hand and pushed Wu Qinghua to the side. This person had completely blocked her aura by pushing her back, okay? This made her very unhappy. She had always been the one to protect others, and didn't need others to protect her. Being protected like this made her feel weak. Wu Qinghua turned around and looked at her with a sullen expression. I just don't want you to be seen by others. Ungrateful female zombie. Duan Wan, who was behind Lin Xiao, also had a cold expression, but her face was calm as if she was used to it. In the past, Lin Xiao was also like this. Wherever she went, the first thing she would face would be the vulgar and disgusting gazes of these men. But soon, these people would know that her boss could only watch from afar. If he wanted to press her under his body and play with her, it would depend on whether he had the life to do so. Just as the atmosphere in the Wuxia command room became a little tense due to the arrival of Wu Qinghua and Lin Xiao, on the other side of the thundercloud, a few figures flashed. Roar! A zombie with a face full of purplish-green blood streaks bared its teeth and twisted its terrifying face. He stood on the ruins, surrounded by black smoke and flames, as if it had been blown up by countless grenades. It was a terrible sight to behold. The ferocious-looking zombie slightly bent its back. Its 10 black nails were about 5 to 6 centimeters long, shining with a cold light. The ground beneath his feet spread outwards. Within a few hundred meters of the square garden, the surrounding buildings and trees were all destroyed, turning into pieces of broken walls and tiles. Traces of black ash from the fire could be seen everywhere. This zombie had a powerful and brutal aura around it, making the high-level zombies a few hundred meters away from it to be careful. It seemed like if something went wrong, these level 1 and level 2 king-level zombies would instantly turn around and run away. Roar dash at this time. The brutal zombie slightly straightened its body, raised its head and roared softly. But its voice was a little weak and unstable. A white shadow quickly flashed to its side, raised its hand, and pressed on its shoulder. A white light began to shine along with that hand. Chapter 775. The berserk zombies slowly calmed down under the power of the female zombie in the white dress. He raised his head, and the veins on his face were wriggling strangely. Under his bangs, a pair of black eyes flashed with purple light, reflecting a fierce and cruel look. Except for the level 5 zombies in the white dress, the other zombies still didn't dare to come close. Mo Yin panted heavily as he raised his head and looked around. He realized that one of the rank 1st kings was missing. There were still 5 level 2nd kings left. Roar dash. Where did he go? Mo Yin roared while he was panting. His voice carried an irresistible pressure. After he asked, the other zombies slightly paused and became much quieter. However, the zombies still didn't dare to come close to him. They just looked at him from afar. Mo Yin looked at them like this, and turned his head to look at the female zombie with his horrifying face. The female zombie's body stiffened under his gaze, but she quickly gathered her courage and roared. Roar dash. Mo Yin was dazed and looked at her in confusion. She said that her companion was dead. Mo Yin was confused about how that subordinate died. What happened when he had a fit? That's right. Mo Yan's mania was getting fiercer and fiercer recently, and the frequency of it was getting more and more frequent. And every time he woke up, it would always be a mess around him. But he didn't remember anything. The female zombie turned around and looked at the other zombies. The other zombies looked at each other. Then, a second-grade king quietly retreated and quickly disappeared from this place. But not long after he appeared again. He was holding a corpse in his hand, and the corpse was already burnt. There was a burnt smell, but the zombies couldn't smell it. Mo Yin was shocked when he saw the corpse. What made him shocked was not the corpse's appearance, but the residual power of his power on the corpse. Therefore, this indicated that this subordinate had been killed by his own lightning bolt. He actually killed the subordinates that he had trained with his own hands when he had a fit. Although these subordinates weren't human, they had been with him for 2 to 3 years. They were all his subordinates. Anyway, he wasn't a human anymore, and he hated human beings. Looking at the zombies that had been with him for the longest time dying, Mo Yan's zombie heart was also in pain. Even when the 6 subordinates were kidnapped by the strange zombie not long ago, he didn't feel so much pain, because he knew that the other party was a female zombie. But he didn't feel any killing intent towards him or his men. Even when he was plotting against her base, the other party didn't reveal any real killing intent. His intuition told him that nothing bad would happen to the zombies that she took away, so he finally gave up on fighting with the female zombie. Anyway, sooner or later he would go back, and at that time he would find a way to get back at her. However, when he saw the lifeless corpse in front of him, his heart sank. His heavy aura had already affected the surrounding zombie kings. All the zombies silently suppressed their breath, and at the same time, they didn't dare to breathe too loudly. However, Mo Yin quickly retracted his aura and slowly walked over to the corpse. The zombies that brought the corpse over had already retreated. His heart ached, but since she was already dead, he could only force himself to accept it. Fortunately, his heart had already hardened a lot and wouldn't have any more emotions. Even though he had lost a subordinate, and it was even killed by him, in his heart, there was only a little bit of pity, a little bit of heartache, and a little bit of guilt. It was like he had a few obedient dogs, and he really liked them, but one day he accidentally killed one of them. That kind of feeling. Mo Yin walked over to the corpse, squatted down and sighed. Then he opened his claws and poked the corpse's head with his fingers. Kacha dash, with a slight twist of his wrist, the zombie's head was split open. After taking out the zombie core, he squeezed it in his palm. The zombie core was crushed and quickly turned into energy that seeped into Mo Yan's palm. Mo Yan stood up and turned his head to look at the direction of China's base. He felt that there were 2 new auras over there, and they were the ones that he had encountered not long ago. That female zombie actually came over. Interesting. The veins on Mo Yan's face slowly retreated to the left side of his face and shrunk to the side of his neck and a small part of his face. A light flashed in his eyes. Roar dash, he turned his head and gave an order to his subordinates. The zombies immediately scrambled to leave and ran as fast as they could. Mo Yan's mission was still the same as before. Gather the zombies, the more the better. He looked at the huge circle of zombies that had formed outside of China's base and felt that it was still not enough. Still not enough. Those powerful paranormals still hadn't come out. The strongest paranormals on the wall were only level 6, and there wasn't a single level 7 paranormal. It seemed that the zombie tide that he had created was not enough to pressure them. On the other side of China's command room, everyone was already sitting around the semicircle table in front of the big screen. Those who could sit at the table were naturally the leaders. Lin Xiao's seat was arranged to the side, and she was like a vase. At least in the eyes of these leaders and directors, Lin Xiao was only beautiful. As for strength, she had just entered level 7, how strong could she be? looking at Wu Qingyue beside her. Everyone had a tacit understanding that Wu Qingyue was the one who helped her become the leader. Wu Qingyue was sitting on the right side of Sikong Chun in the middle. He crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the chair as he smiled and said, "Looks like the situation is still optimistic. At least we haven't reached level 7 yet." His eyes would occasionally glance at the seat next to Lin Xiao. Sikong Chun was sitting in front of the screen. On the left was Gao Haoyun. Wu Qingyue originally wanted to sit next to Lin Xiao, but someone beat him to it and sat down. That person was Hu Zhiyong. He thought that no matter how lustful Hu Zhiyong was, he wouldn't dare to make a move on Lin Xiao in such an important meeting. However, he didn't expect that before Lin Xiao sat down, this person had the guts to reach out his perverted hand to grab her hand. He even smiled and asked Lin Xiao to sit down, while rubbing her hand. Lin Xiao stood there without moving, and calmly smiled at Hu Zhiyong, who was rubbing her hand. "Director Hu, don't blame me for not reminding you. My hand is poisonous." The smile on Hu Zhiyong's face froze, and then he said indifferently, "Is that so? Beauty, your hand is so smooth, how could it be poisonous?" His face showed that he didn't care, but he let go of her hand. Lin Xiao sat down with a faint smile and said, "You should be glad that you only used one hand to touch me." Hu Zhiyong seriously looked at Lin Xiao's eyes, and thought that this woman must be lying to him. It couldn't be poisonous. If it was, his hand would still be fine. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.